Don't look at it as a transition. Look at it as an integration. Give yourself a break. I personally will never hire anyone who was in for service and this is their first job, because they'll be out of it in a year. They'll figure it out like, okay, I don't want to do this. I want the person, their second job, right? Of course, I'd hire anybody, but you know what I'm saying? You have no clue what you're getting into, right? So the first clue is be good to yourself. Go back to love yourself, give yourself grace. You just were in a crazy operating environment, right? No matter what spectrum you were on. And you did great and you did it honorably and ethically. And if you didn't, own up to it, right? Own up to it. And that was a mistake. That was the roller coaster, right? You made that decision for some reason. Who the heck knows why? But just own up to it. And then create your life new every single day. It ain't that hard, but it's the hardest thing you could ever do as a human.
Welcome back, everyone. My guest this time was recruited out of high school to play basketball at the Naval Academy, but he ended up playing rugby. Similarly, he originally chose, or was thinking he was going to choose, Marine Infantry and was swayed to select naval aviation. This put him on a course to eventually graduate from Top Gun. 11 years into it, he was done, or at least he thought he was done. So he chose to get out. This led to the next 10 years of what would loosely be called a struggle between business startups and a lot of drinking. But things turned around for him a couple years ago when he moved to San Diego. Today, his professional title is Business Development Strategist, but he went deep into the rabbit hole of stock market pattern prediction. And that's an extreme overgeneralization. He can explain it much better. He's also started SUP Vets. It's a stand-up paddleboard nonprofit that hosts retreats for veterans and first responders to help them regain the camaraderie they lost by transitioning away from these careers. He's also on the board of directors for Behind Thin Lines. It's also a nonprofit that helps veterans address trauma-related stress through the use of psychedelics and natural medicine. This was a fun conversation, so let's get into it. Here's episode 138 with James Bartelloni. Where I want to start, in doing my research on you, I saw you on a podcast. And this
Which one? JC Peretz?
You've been on quite a few of them, and
Yeah,
I'm sorry.
that's okay.
Kind of scrambling to get it all in.
I was just curious.
But you made a comment of you fell asleep during the most recent Top Gun Maverick.
I did.
And why I want to lead with that is I just saw on social media the other day that they're actually working on a Top Gun 3.
I saw that. I can't imagine.
I guess from your perspective, and we're going to get to it, your bona fides, so to speak, of why you get to talk about it. But what was the issue with the second one compared to the first one to you? Or since you slept through the whole thing,
so I've watched it
since.
The flying episodes are amazing, right? In fact, one of my good friends, JJ Cummings, he was one of the military advisors for the movie, right? And they did the best they could, and it's Hollywood. So the overall story is just it's not based in reality, right? But it's Hollywood. It's not supposed to be.
Right.
The flying scene's excellent, right? But it was the same thing. This is the next thing I knew, I was sleeping. I was out like a light. So, but I watched it again for the flying, and it was amazing, right? That was real flying. So, but the whole story and, there's a persona of a lot of people who end up flying fighters and go to Top Gun. And you're cocky, and I'm more of the quiet type, and I never really talk about it. It was awesome. It was the pinnacle of my career. The instructors are phenomenal. The whole thing is a commitment to excellence, constantly, everything you do, right? So it was hard too, right? I think it was 14, 16 weeks long, 12, 14-hour days. So it's not hanging out, playing volleyball. And, we go to Reno on the weekends. I did it up in Fallon, Nevada, not here at Miramar. So it was just different, and you probably watch maybe some cop shows and you're like, oh, really? Same thing, right? So I don't want to badmouth it. It's an incredible movie. Tom Cruise is incredible, but it's just, it's not really based in reality.
From the outsider looking in, my analogy is the first Top Gun is still watchable today.
Sure.
It's still really enjoyable. You've got the different backstory on it. So just like you mentioned, you see it the way I might see a cop show and you're kind of like, that couldn't have happened or whatever. Whereas the second one doesn't make you want to go back and watch it again.
Yeah. It's interesting. I was literally a freshman in college when I was graduating from high school. So I went into the Naval Academy with that movie. It was like, I'm on, and I kind of agree with you. The second one, but if you're a 20-something looking to do something with your life, like I spent my 20s in a Tomcat. Not bad, pretty cool. You hit
the nail on the head. That first Top Gun is legitimately a recruiting video for the Navy.
You nailed it. Yeah.
I don't think that this current one makes somebody want to go be a Top Gun pilot or a pilot in the Navy.
Yeah, and you can kind of tell, the after effects. So let's see what they do with 3. I mean, how many manned planes are there going to be? Is it going to be all UAVs? I mean,
it's going to be interesting.
We could go there too.
We're going to watch it though.
Oh, yeah, for sure. But yeah, I remember I was like, wow, I'm going to the Naval Academy and I might be able to do that, and I did it. So pretty cool. I had no idea. When I've flew all my life, I got to fly. It wasn't anything like that. In fact, when you did your service selection, I was in Club 34, and I'm proud of that. We were truly the club. We were the farthest away from what was the officer of the day at Bancroft Hall, where they house all the midshipmen. We were like 8-3, which is way back. So that they're never going back to look at us, and we were the club. We were like the MASH unit. We just chilled out.
Oh, you're dating yourself now.
I know, but I didn't watch it that much. But so when I went to, do service selection, I was actually thinking of being a Marine Corps infantry officer. Bad idea, Jeans. That would have never happened. But as I was going down the steps, I heard Colonel Fagan, who had won the Navy Cross for this amazing act of valor he did in Vietnam. I'm like, I'm going Marines. I actually had my Marine Corps cami cover in my STBs, right? And then I go down another level, and it's Admiral Dunleavy, who was the chief of naval air. And I'm like, I'm going naval aviation. So I literally am like,
what you're saying is you were impressionable.
I was very impressionable, but then finally, like, Midshipman Bartelloni, and I'm like, naval aviation. I mean, I didn't even really think about it. I just did it. And then my wife, my fiance at the time, what are we going to do? And I'm like, naval aviation. She's like, what? I thought you were going to be a Marine. She probably should have left me then. We're now married 34 years with 4 beautiful kids and 5 grandkids. So
congratulations.
Thank you. It's awesome.
Before we get too far forward, let's take it backwards a little bit.
Yeah.
Where did you grow up?
So I grew up in Northern Virginia, right in the smack. During COVID, did you watch The Americans? That Netflix special? Or maybe it wasn't Netflix. It was
that the spies?
Yeah. Whoever you are out there, they nailed it, because that was Northern Virginia that I grew up with. The commercials were the same, the houses, the cars.
And it was that time period.
Yeah. And I remember Hanson, and I remember riding bikes by the bridge that he had done the drops and stuff. And I look back on it now, and I think my entire community was FBI and CIA. My mom worked for the CIA. My dad had worked for the CIA. But then he went and worked for General Electric E-Systems, and so I think that whole area of Northern Virginia was basically working for one of the 5 agencies or the government or something. So I grew up in Northern Virginia. My dad was in the Navy in World War II. My grandfather immigrated from Italy. In fact, my oldest brother still has his gas mask from World War I, right? So I got recruited to play basketball and soccer. That's kind of like why I was interested in Navy. I showed up. I realized I was a Division III athlete in a Division I world. These guys are a lot better than me, right? And David Robinson, it was when he was on the team, and the coach, I remember, is like, you'd be a really good practice player. I'm like, I don't think so. So I ended up going and played rugby. And the best guys in the world. Still, we keep in touch to this day. So did the naval aviation track. And that was just amazing training. And so I ended up out here for learning how to fly the Tomcat at Miramar. When I was at Naval Air Station, it's now Marine Corps.
I'm going to take you back though, just a little bit. As a kid growing up, were you a good kid, like academics?
No.
Okay.
No. Good kid, altar boy, had my lawn jobs. I had an all-American family growing up. I really did. I had an amazing childhood.
Brothers, sisters?
3 brothers, 1 sister. I was the youngest of 5. A Roman Catholic through and through. Not anymore. But yeah, my parents, my siblings, it was an incredible. And I grew up in Northern Virginia, right in the middle of a lot of it. And I'd ride my bike down to DC, and I'd ride by Kennedy's Flame, and just
better times.
Yeah, it was proud times to be an American, quite frankly. We're not going to go there, but it was really cool. And so I grew up there, and I met my wife in high school. So we're high school sweethearts. And like I said, we've been together 40 years.
Now, you mentioned, obviously, and we're going to get to it, you went to the Naval Academy.
Yeah.
Growing up, was that your track? I know you said you got recruited, but what were you thinking?
No, not at all. 0. And that's the thing. Like, some people, like, to this day, they're like, "Oh, what type of plane's that?" I'm like, "I don't know." I don't know. The plane, right? I think I had in my mind that I wanted to do something from a military or a service perspective, but the military, I don't want to say it was farthest from my mind. My dad had taken me to a couple of air shows. Like, wow, that's cool. And then, we'd booked over 50 minutes to Annapolis and gone to a football game growing up. But I really didn't know what I was getting into. And actually, when I did the recruiting trip, I still remember this. I came back, I said, "There's no way I'm going to that school. It's bizarre. Why would you want to do that?" So I had to prep a year. So I went to the prep school. Definitely needed that. Yeah.
I was going to say, how was your military bearing coming out of high school and going into that environment?
Yeah, I was always a little bit disciplined, mostly because of my dad, right? He ran a pretty tight ship. So, like I said, I was more of a jock, not a very big studier. And somehow I got in the Navy. I wouldn't now, for sure. Especially as an athlete too. I definitely not could have. So. But I just, it just kind of fell in my lap, really. And then, even I majored in math. 2.08 is what I graduated my math degree. And when they asked me, I said, well, I know what I don't want to do. And they're like, "What's that?" I go, "I don't want to take a language. I don't want to do labs. And I don't want to write papers." And the guy's like, "Be a math major." I'm like, "Okay." Boy, I didn't know what I was getting into. And I was on academic probation probably 3 or 4 semesters out of my whole time there. So I'm kind of a John McCainer, if you will. I might have gotten one of the last naval aviation slots too, but I graduated.
Were you
still knock on wood? Did it really happen?
You're like, they can't come and take it back from me.
I think so. Still have bad dreams, but anyway, Paul.
Going into that, was math something that you gravitated towards growing up? In high school, were you good in math?
Great question.
Because math would have, if you'd have given me the option between writing 1,000 papers and math, I'd have taken the 1,000 papers.
Well, what's funny is in my plebe year English class, they wanted me to go honors English. And so my first classman, this guy named Walt Sechrist, big, huge, redheaded guy. He looks like, who's the Heat Miser? Remember that from the Bumble, the Rudolph?
Yes,
guy?
yes.
He looked like that. He's huge. He was a bodybuilder, and come in here. And I'm like, and he's like, the whole world, when you get out and when you stay in, is about cocktail parties and being able to network. He goes, "You're getting a Bachelor of Science in English. You're getting the most well-rounded education you'll ever get. Go English." And I was like, huh. He goes, "And you can talk the classics, all these books, and he's like, it's the best. And it's the best for a naval officer to be well-rounded." And I'm like, wow, that makes a lot of sense. So I called my dad. "I think I'm going to go English." "No, you're not." Like, "Why not, Dad?" "Because you're at a technical school, you will get a technical degree." And I'm like, "Yeah, but it doesn't matter, right? I'm just going to be commissioned and I'm going to go do whatever I want." "No." So I listened to him. So I went math. And I look back now, my buds from high school said I was always a geek. I didn't see myself that way. My wife says I am too. So maybe I had that bent to me because I know where we're going to go later. But what I did in math has nothing to do with where I ended up now. Maybe it had a little bit, but I graduated.
That was
barely.
That's all that was important. You graduated.
Yeah, my really good friend Bob Levy, my daughter's getting married in Bali in June.
Nice.
You can go there. That's incredible, right? And people are like, what do you think? I'm like, I think nothing. She's an adult. Her fiance is an amazing young man. And they're going to go create a life in Bali. Yeah, it kind of sucks that they're around the world, but who am I? It's their life. Go for it, right? But they're all coming up next weekend. And I have a couple of my rugby mates who I graduated with, who I flew with, just really good friends. And we were talking about it. My buddy, Bob Levy, he was the honor chairman. I think he graduated like top 20 at Navy. He might have had a 4.0 in math. And we were playing rugby. We were going up to Boston University on a St. Patrick's Day weekend. I can say
not
this now.
A fun weekend at all.
So out of control. I can say this now. In fact, my really good friend, and she lived across from me, is now the superintendent at the Naval Academy. And she married her husband, Keith. And they're the only active duty admiral couple in the history of the United States Navy. And she's now the superintendent. So I can say this now. So we get outside the gate and we went and we got 2 kegs of beer. And we drove up to BU and everyone's drinking beer. And I'm in the corner trying to figure out this math test with my buddy Bob, who I see in a week. And he finally just goes, you need to go get a beer. You're going to fail. I'm like, so that
Thanks
bad?
for the confidence.
He's like, you got no clue. I'm like, I got no clue. And I failed it. I got a 10 on it. I had to take summer school. But anyway, I didn't really have any, I will be a Naval Academy graduate. I will fly fighters. Yes. And I want to be a math major. None of that. I just kind of went with the flow.
Well, and you already talked about how the different people who impacted your decision and what you chose to do.
Yes, a great point for our podcast. Trust your gut, right? I should have listened to my dad. He was best man at my wedding. I had a great relationship. I love my dad. He's graduated, but I should have been like, well, so what? I'm going to do it because I really would have liked it. I also, after my first year or semester of playing rugby, they said, hey, and during the wintertime, come out for boxing. I was like, that'd be good. So it
seems like they go hand in hand.
Yeah, a little aggressiveness and stuff. And so I remember calling my dad. He goes, that's the stupidest thing I've ever heard. You're going to get your bell rung. Like, well, I guess I won't box.
Like I'm not getting rung on the rugby field?
I remember going to the chemistry class. You had to take boxing as a plebe. And my head just hurting. And God, what was his name? Jerome. He was a Golden Gloves boxer, African-American dude, such a good guy. And he felt so bad for me, but he's like, and I never saw his, all I knew is my head would move. Like, good night. I'm like, can you please, can you please stop? And then I go to chemistry class. Ow, my head hurts. So he's probably right on that decision.
Sounds like that is the exact story of me in the police academy, because we had to do boxing back then.
Sure, yeah.
And the people that they boxed these young recruits against who have no experience is the police boxing team.
The guy you were talking about earlier.
And it's like, they hit you 4 times and they go, oh, you got your guard down. Well, maybe tell me before you hit me for the 4th time.
Yeah, you only realize you got hit the 4th time. You don't even realize.
Yeah.
You're like, was that one punch or did I just get hit 15 times? That was horrible.
I still remember we were in a gymnasium and they didn't have dedicated rings. It was just taped off areas. And you might have started in square number 1, but ended up in the opposing square just because you're trying to back up.
I would have been knocked down by that time. So you're much better than me. But yeah, it was ugly.
It was a horrible experience.
So my dad's 1 for 1. Not bad. 50-50. Everything's neutral anyway. So
had you had any experience flying when you selected aviation?
Nothing. A lot of guys would go and get their private pilot's license like they were hardcore. I am going to fly for the Navy, right? Their dad had done it or something, and they're just, that's what I'm going to do. I had none of that. So when I showed up at flight school in Pensacola, I didn't even know what lift was. Maybe I did. We took physics. I probably should know that. But I had no clue.
So what year did you start the Naval Academy?
86.
And you graduated?
90.
And straight down to Pensacola?
Great story. 2.08. Got the last billet. So one of the last billets. So I didn't start till like November. So we graduated in May. So me and my wife, I got married 2 days out of the academy at the chapel. We were able to hang out in Annapolis for 7 months. It was great. Just waiting for class to start. And I worked for an amazing American. One of my heroes, Admiral Preer, ended up being ambassador to China. Just an amazing, and the lore of his exploits in Vietnam as an A6 pilot, just beyond comprehensible what these guys did back then. So I hung out with him for 7 months. And I mean, what an experience to just be around a true leader, you know? So yeah, but I had a little bit of a delay starting flight school.
Were you acting as simply like an aide?
Yeah. You know, just a bump on a log and, hey, go do this. And, you know, he sent me out on this one assignment that I just still remember it. Right. And it was 25 years ago, 30 years ago. And he wanted me to clean up and take a picture of a grave of someone who had been recently buried. And, you know, I cleaned it up and he was like, this is what we do. And it had a lasting impact on me. You know, I'm like, wow, he's going out of his way for this family and take a picture of this dad that was interned in the Naval Academy grave yard. I was like, wow, these guys are amazing individuals, guys and gals.
Do you know Hal Schmidt?
No.
So he was Top Gun. I'm not sure. I don't remember the years off the top of my head, but he was one of my very first interviews.
Oh, wow.
And what was really interesting about that story with him was Top Gun, he was into his 17th year in the Navy at that point in time. He was up at Lemoore, did not like wine, but his wife and her friends loved it. So he would be the designated driver, drive him over the hill into Paso, do wine tasting and drive him back home. And then he said one day, he goes, I just happened to taste, and I can't remember the winery that he mentioned, taste the wine. He's like, oh man, this is amazing. And it wasn't that he wanted to drink more. He wanted to learn how to make it. So then he started driving over and volunteering to help the winemaker make the wine. Fast forward, he's now a winemaker himself, has his own winery.
Amazing.
But loved it so much. And the idea being, because I want to, in the Navy, he would have gone from a captain to
Admiral.
No. Okay. So then a lieutenant to lieutenant colonel,
commander to captain,
maybe some
05 to 06.
There was something that was going to force him to spend the last couple of years behind a desk as opposed to being able to fly, whatever rank it was. And he's like, I cannot do that. And walked away at 17 years.
I know a lot of guys. My first business partner, he left at 15. I'm out. It's like, they're like, and he'd screen for command too. He's gonna be a fighter squadron skipper. He's like, I'm out. Bam, 15 years. I mean, I'm kind of an idiot too. I think I was 11 or 12. But that's the misnomer, right? I have a theory. You have five and dives. Great Americans wanted to serve their country, did their time, and they get out, right? Then you have like the 10 to 12 year point, kind of like me, where, but then you look and you're like, God. And I find that we're more entrepreneurial risk takers, right? Like he was. He learned how to create wine and created a winery and said, F it, 17 years, 3 more years, I don't care. I'm going to go do this now, right? And that's your 10 to 12. They don't go to 20. And then you have your corporate guys. Again, not saying that in a negative manner. It's just the corporate men and women stay 20 and on they go. The misnomer is there's such a jump in pay as an officer staying to 25, right? That you're a fool not to stay to 25. So it's really not a 20-year retirement, right? It's really 25 plus if you really want to get a nice bump in that retirement pay and those benefits, right? So I was looking actually at 15 years, right? And I was just gone half, my 3 daughters, I think the oldest was 10 when I got out. Yeah, she would have been 10. I was gone half their life. And my third daughter is probably 3/4 of her life, up until she was 4 or 5, right? So I was just like, I'm done. I want to be home. And I had the entrepreneurial bent. Here's the Kool-Aid to be management and go to the war college. I'm like, I don't want to study Clausewitz. I don't give a crap about this crap. They would let me stay in the cockpit. I probably would have stayed, right? But that's not realistic. And that's not in the needs of the Navy, right? And that's business. That's the transition.
And one of the things that I've learned in doing this podcast is, for many of us, and I'll put myself in that basket, when you go towards a government job, whatever it is, we buy into that Kool-Aid. We buy into that sign on the dotted line. We'll see you in 20 years, 30 years, whatever it is. And for many of us, we get to that 12-year mark, that 10-year mark, whatever it is. And you just look at that calendar and you're like, but we stick it out because we go, I can't walk away from this retirement.
Yeah.
And we don't look at the big picture of, if I walked away today and I put the right effort into it, I'm going to far exceed anything I'll be able to do over the next 10 or 15 years.
Yeah. 100%.
And so that's been my new thing with the podcast is if your heart's not in it today, don't stick it out just for the sake of especially don't stick it out just for a retirement check.
I call it sandpaper of the soul. You will die. In fact, my really good friend Paul, we have a scale. It's called the DGAS, which is don't give a shit, and the SDI, which is the soul destruction index, right? So at any one time, you want your DGAS to be high, your SDI to be low. So your soul destruction index is a 0. You're good. And you really don't give a shit, then you flow, right? And so we'll do a check-in. SDI DGAS, he's like 5. I'm like, man, you got to get above 5, dude. Like, yeah, I'm dying here, right? Or 2, all right, stop, go for a run, go do something. The soul destruction index is taking you over. And so, unfortunately, I think a lot of people, when they get to that point, they just basically roll into a world of apathy until they retire. But for me, I'm all about energy. And so you bring that apathy into your transition. I brought negativity into my transition, and I had a horrible time for about 10 years.
Well, and that apathy and that overall unhappiness, even if you don't acknowledge it, even if you try to tell yourself that you're not unhappy, that you're not apathetic to your job, that you're not just fed up with everything, you could try to fool yourself, but everybody around you knows that you're not happy.
Big time.
And so now it starts having that ripple effect because you're impacting your family and you're impacting everybody around you for the sake of holding to this drudging path for this end result that's really not at the end of the day worth it.
Yeah. Yeah, for sure. And a lot of, I think it's a no-brainer for our first responders, police officers, and military people. The passion of the mission is what keeps you going, right? And when you lose that passion, you need to find it, and you need to go find something that intellectually and physically stimulates you, because I think those 3 types of people are just mission-oriented, right? And it doesn't matter if you become a gardener or a trashman or whatever, you're going to do the best you can, right? Because it's the right thing to do. And that's a hard transition, right? Because the bottom line is, in the end, it's about the bottom line, right? So you can be all passionate and everything, but if you're not doing what they need you to do, they're not going to have you hang out for 20 years. But boy, whoa. That's not a great place to be either.
For you, when you showed up at Pensacola, did you know it was going to be fighters?
No. So it's needs of the Navy, right? So you've got fighters, you've got E2s, you've got S3s, A6s, Hornets, and then you got the big, the P3s and the TACAMO jets take charge and move out for the nuclear command and control. I mean, there's all kinds of different platforms. And so the first part of it is just basic, and it's theory, it's aerodynamic theory. You get in a propeller plane, you basically learn air navigation, basically how to go up in the sky and drive around the highway in the sky, and there's a lot to it. There's a lot going on, and frankly, you can kill yourself, right? So you kind of go through that, and then you have a track, you can select helicopters, you can select jets, anything fixed wing, props, right? And if you're number 1, you get your first choice. Number 2, needs of the Navy, right? You might get it, you might not. And so I saw a lot of guys who were like 3 out of 10, and they ended up in a helo squadron. But here's what's really interesting. And it might be a lot like the police, right? Hey, I want to be undercover. I want to be detective. I want to be SWAT. Ultimately, everybody who went to their squadron in the platform, even if they were like, I wanted to fly fighters, ended up loving it. And I think it's because of the people, right? So yeah, flying a helo around is really cool. In fact, if someone wants to go into the military now and fly, I would recommend that they fly helicopters, because they're the most dynamic and tactical, and they're really, really hanging it out. The 5th generation fighters, they're up at 50,000 feet playing a video game, If you're getting shot at or you're down low, you're doing something wrong, right? And now they're marvels of technology. They really are. But if you really want to get in there and get after it, helicopter is the way to go right now, right? So again, you look at business, you might not get that opportunity that you were looking for, but if you bring a good attitude and you work with your team and you're ultimately, I think more than the military, if you keep open lines of communication and you talk directly and you let people know what you want to do and what, just communicate with people, they'll do it. Because the company's spending a lot of money bringing you in, interviewing you, training you, right? It's 6 months and probably $50,000, $150,000, $200,000 to get you to that point. And you're excited enough to accept it. So let's keep this person engaged. And so in the business world, speak up, right? Speak up when it's time, but speak up when you feel like you really need to. You had no say, right? If you're a fourth, they're like fighters. Holy smokes, I got fighters, right? I was 2. I got lucky. And I mean, we're tracking it in flight school. Oh, they put 3 to fighters here and 2 to helos. And we're looking, I mean, you're like, you're not crazy over it, but you're like, and when my class got winged, I was like, oh, there might be like 3 or 4 fighter slots open. And there was. And so I got lucky enough to get it.
Coming out number 2, though, at flight school, that's quite an accomplishment.
It is, but we're all really close. And it was only like 8 or 9 guys that went through flight school with me too, right? So it wasn't like I was a distant 2 from 3 or 4. And you're not competing, right? Everyone's just trying to do their best. And we had study groups, and that was the whole thing about Top Gun trophy. There is no Top Gun trophy. Doesn't exist. So I don't know where they got that one from. So, but you're going in to fly fighters and be a tactical aviator, and most of the people were athletes in college or high school. So there's going to be some competitive nature to it. But once you get into and are accepted into the fold of naval aviation, no one's trying to get you to fail. Everyone wants you to succeed, and you're starting to make your reputation in flight school, probably just like in the police, right? The reputation is going to follow you, right? So if you're seen as, oh yeah, this guy was number 1, we call it bilging your class, but he bilged everyone to get there. Yeah, he might get fighters, but that's fighter squadron knows, right, before he sets up, right? So then you go to a fleet replacement squadron. We called it the RAG, Reserve Air Group, and that's all how to implement the Tomcat. Air to ground, air to air, carrier qualifications. When you're in flight school, you're just kind of flying with instruments, stick and throttle, guys in the back. I was in the back, we have all the instruments, radios, right? But now you have stuff on your plane, right? So you're not taking off, going into the airways and landing. You're taking off, going into a military operating area and fighting or dropping bombs or doing reconnaissance, right? So the training really steps up. The other thing, and you still remember to this day, the T-34, the T-45, the T-2, T being training, they're really small. Tomcat is 10 feet high. I jumped in that thing. I'm like, oh, crap. And remember the Bugs Bunny cartoon when Bugs Bunny's hanging on the moon? Get me out of here! I mean, that was basically me for the first 50 hours in the Tomcat. I'm just holding on to the vertical tails. This thing is, I'm just like, I'm never going to be able to implement this thing. It's huge. It's 10 times faster. I mean, there's so many. I'm just like, there's no way. And they're like, just talk on the radio, So you just build it up, and the next thing you know, you're at Top Gun. It's like, wow, the training is incredible.
But from the opposite side of that, have you had the opportunity to look at a modern fighter and with the mindset of what you used to see compared to what they've got in and around them?
Yeah.
I mean, it's probably night and day.
It is. But what's interesting is I was involved in a little bit of the early designs of what technology can do and how we would implement it. So I know that the tactics have changed, but the concepts, they're all still the same, even from the guys who initially started Top Gun back in the 1970s, right? But the technology today is beyond Thunderdome. It's really, really incredible. And the only problem is it's very expensive, very finicky, right? And we don't have enough of them. The adversaries, they're near peer, right? Don't get me wrong. The Chinese fighter pilots and some of their technology is very good. Same with Russia, right? When the Cold War ended and we were able to get our hands on some of the MiG-29s, we were afraid of that. It's just, you just build this person up into a 9-foot person. But the near peers of ours have thousands of lesser capable 3rd generation jets, if you will. We're not going to be able to shoot them all down. And they don't care. Yeah. So you send a wave of 50 jets at 4 F-35s, they'll get a lot of them. They ain't getting them all of them. Right. So that's a big deal. But our technology, I still think, is superior or better. We just don't have enough numbers. Sorry, I went on a tangent.
No. It's interesting, and one of the things I go back to that. I think back to the original Top Gun movie, and they're talking about how we lost our ability to dogfight. But do you see the future, barring anything? What do they say? World War III is going to be fought with nuclear. World War IV will be fought with sticks and stones. Yeah. But with the technology increasing, do you think air-to-air combat's going to be at eye range, or is it all radar and
100%
miles away?
Well, it's a great question. Depends, right? We went over to Israel and we did an Israeli det, and the first 4 days they destroyed us, right? They count takeoffs and landings. We count hours. Their reaction time is less than 2 minutes, right? We knock off fights, right? So if you get a 2-circle fight, right, you just like, hey, knock it off. We're just burning gas. They don't. They're like, no. You keep fighting, and their flights might last 8 minutes. They're an afterburner the whole time fighting, and okay, it ended up a stalemate, but actually one person died because we ran out of gas and we had to come back, right? So the Israelis, they'll never give up on air-to-air combat. That's what they do. We come in from the sea, right? 200 miles out. We got the AWACS. We got a big picture, right? We're using electronic attack. We're using all these different techniques and skills and everything. We shouldn't get into a air-to-air combat visual range, right? No one should be able to sneak up on an F-35, but they will. And then we got to fight, right? So we got our asses kicked in Israel, and it went all the way back to the Pentagon. And we've been flying straight in level at 30,000 feet, delivering GBUs. We haven't been fighting. So it took us about 4 or 5 days. And I would say we probably would have lost 10 to 15 jets. Think about the reaction to that. That hadn't happened since Vietnam, right? It was 60 years ago. We're getting ready probably to lose some jets to air-to-air combat. How's the public going to react to that, right? So, yes, I still think we need to train to air-to-air combat. It's a lot of fun. As a backseater, I really didn't like it because it's chaos. It really is. I liked 80 miles out, get the picture. All right, I got this, right? My job is to keep sight of the person he's not fighting. So I would be upside down like an octopus. Like, okay, now that I'm upside down, twisting and everything, how do I describe and get his eyes back on it, right? So it was pretty dynamic, and there's nothing like it. See, like a 4v4, 4 planes versus 4 planes, turn into a 8-plane dogfight. It's like the Battle of Britain and Tomcats and F-16s. You're just like, we're getting paid to do this. Oh shit, we almost hit someone. It's like, it was great, man.
I imagine being in the back seat, though, there's that reaction time to when you're, I even think about for those of us who have rode a 2-man car in patrol.
Sure. Yeah.
When you're not in control of the steering wheel, there's that lag time between knowing that the car is going to go left or go right. I'd imagine the same kind of thing when you're in the back seat. The pilot knows he's going to go right or climb or descend. And you've got that lag, like, oh shit, now I got to catch up.
Yeah. I get asked that a lot, right? I never didn't feel in control of the jet, and where the backseater sat in a Tomcat, we were basically on the center of gravity. So I don't know, I got 1,500 plus hours in the Tomcat. After about 400 or 500, you feel it. You can feel when you're slow. You feel when your angle of attack's off. And it might not be the same for the squad car, but I would literally be ahead of the pilot before they'd make a move.
Got it.
And then the more senior you got, the more junior I flew with. So these guys wanted me to tell them what to do, right? They're like, please talk, So there was like this demarcation point where I was with the senior pilot, learn the tricks of the trade, see how they fight. how they land on the boat.
Hopefully.
Yeah. Right. Yeah. I got so many stories.
That's got to have a pucker factor that most people will just never experience.
It's pretty crazy. Yeah. In fact, I was talking to a young man. He's doing an elective course. Yeah, he's doing an elective course at Boston University about war and combat trauma and coming back into society. So I was just talking to him, and I was just like, yeah, I surf now. I started a nonprofit because that's the only thing that gives me the feeling of a catapult shot. It's heroin. I don't mind telling. I've never done heroin, but I hear it's a good kick. It's undescribable, right? Sometimes I'd feel like my fillings were getting hit out. 78,000 pounds, 125 to 130 miles an hour in about 2 seconds. You know, do that over and hundreds of times. It's like, man, I need a hit, right? So the catapult shot was Mr. Toad's wild ride. And it was just one of those things where you knew you had 2 seconds. Right. And in fact, my roommate, Gooch, Tim Gamache, and then the guy I went through Top Gun with, Cal Worthington from Florida. Come on down, Cal Worthington's used cars. No kidding, he was Cal. He's also this.
My old dog Spot.
Yeah. He was actually, I didn't even know this was a thing, the Florida High School State Meat Judging Contest winner. Yeah. So when you're in Top Gun, they had this.
Not a title you want to tell a bunch of sailors that you...
Yeah, so he goes, come on in the arena with me. I'm like, what are we doing? We're going to go pick out steaks. I'm like, what? For the graduation dinner at Top Gun. I'm like, all right, dude, I just want to get off the base. I go, what do you know? He goes, I'm the Florida. I'm like, what? He went in with this butcher. They had all these marbles and I was just like, you are? He's like, we got the best steaks. It was incredible. But where were we going with that anyway?
Well, what came to my mind was, so we're the...
So the catapult, the soft cat. So they did a night respot. And if you got to go in the morning and you got 30 jets on the flight line and you have a strike going, you want to get the Hornets to get their gas first and you want to get the Prowlers in station for electronic attack, right? It's a dance. And the handler who's in charge of the flight deck here, he's like, ain't going to happen. So what do? At 2:00 in the morning, they launch all the jets. And it was kind of cool. We'd bypass the dump switch for the troops and we'd dump and then we'd go to afterburner. It'd be this big, huge light show. It's totally illegal. But I can't get in trouble for it anymore now, can I? Who knows?
You don't need to look up and around.
Probably want to arrest me for something. But anyway.
The microphone's right in front of you. It's not hidden.
Yeah. But when we started dropping bombs in the Tomcat, the brilliant engineers out of Patuxent River didn't take into account the tensile stress on the nose strut, right? We were averaging, 6,000 to 8,000 pounds more when we were carrying bombs than traditionally these jets that have been flying for 20 years were used to. And so what developed was these little micro brakes in the nose gear. And so I'm behind the JBD, jet blast deflector at 2:00 in the morning. We're pissed. We're like, we're the old guys. We should be asleep. The new guys are getting their sliders and because they wouldn't send the new guys out on these night respots. And
it's basically just clearing off runway space and top space.
Yeah. So, and the strike lead for the next day will go to the handler. Hey, here's okay, I'll call them down, and then that way they park them and they're ready to go the next morning. So anyway, the nose gear shattered, and JBD comes down and it's just this big, huge fireball, and so you can tell if it's a good cat. Right, especially the backseaters sitting where they're sitting, and they knew that it was a soft cat. Well, they had spit it, the nose gear had shattered. Full afterburner, punched the tanks. They get out. The jet, I think, 12 feet is what they calculated. Full afterburner goes up. They boom, boom, right? All I saw, it's 60 feet for the carry. I just saw 2 vertical tails go, doop. And I was like, oh. And then the yellow shirt's like this, and we're like, we're not going flying. I'm like, got my flashlight. I'm like, no way. And my pilot, we're like, no way. And we're like, no. I'm like, don't let go of those brakes. I'm not letting go of those brakes, right? And finally, the skipper of the ship's like, you're not going flying. We just want to get you out of the way. We're like, oh, okay. Yeah. Whew. But it went full afterburner, like 2 miles out in front of the ship, and just goes straight in and boom, explodes. And we were like, wow, that's so cool. And then we're like, whoa. those are buds. Did they make it out? It's twisted. You know how it is. It's twisted. But they made it out. Thank God. And just to kind of give you the mindset. So Gooch was the backseater. He lived with me on the boat. And he got picked up first. Funny story. He when you fall off or when someone goes overboard, they throw the flashlights. They all float so you can see where they are. He thinks he got hit by like 50 flashlights. And they're the heavy ones, you know? Jeez.
I was alive until I got hit by all the flashlights.
The carrier's going by. So the first thing he does, I got to tell this story.
Please.
He does one hit and a shoot, lands, turns around, and here comes 100 tons? How many tons? Aircraft carrier that's making its own wind. So it's going like 35 knots. So you get wind over the deck. Oh, shit. So he says he gives it like, tries to get out of the way. Boom. Gets hit by the bow wave. Tumbles over it, right? Still hadn't seawater activation system. The parachute's still with him. He's trying to get that off, right? He's tumbling, takes in all this freaking water, throws up, getting hit by 50 flashlights. And then he comes by the smoking sponson. And that's where, in probably about this size room, 100 dudes go to smoke. And he's like, the smell. So he starts just smelling, you know. So anyway, the little 20-year-old kid right out of A school as a rescue swimmer jumps in. I'm here. And he's like, okay. And Gooch says, he's like, oh, shit. Gooch played football.
I was going to say, you're a big fella. 270
with his gear on. I mean, the guy's huge. He's like 6'2", 210, lifter. And the poor kid goes, Dunk! He can't get his arms around him. Gooch is like, come with, you know, and I just want to. And so they start getting lifted up. And the poor rescue swimmer just starts sliding down. And he's like 20 feet up and he falls back into the water. It's total comedy. So he gets in.
It's comedy now.
That was comedy then. That's the thing. You know, everyone, oh my gosh, these strikes, like the first 2 or 3 nights of, I won't even say the operation, there was no AWACS control. So the ROE was, if it's flying south, shoot it. And it was that sophisticated. So people are like, oh my gosh, these people. Like,
that's our military.
That's right. It's insanity. It's just complete insanity. So he's like, this is the mindset. So he's like, hey, where's Cal? And he gets smacked on the head, right? And his Cal, he's like, oh my God, you know, we're alive. And Cal goes like this. How's my hair? Swear to God. He was just like, what? He goes, we're going to get off. I don't want my hair to look bad, you know, because it's loud in the helicopter. He was just like, your hair's fine. Really?
Priorities, man. Priorities.
True story.
So 2 things that come to mind. I want to go back to the catapult launches.
Yeah.
And where I want to go with that is we're of the same era. And I don't know if you followed it, but drag racing evolved significantly through the 70s, the 80s, the 90s.
Haven't followed it. But
well, where I'm going with this, do you remember Big Daddy Darn Garlits?
I don't.
Okay, so he is a very famous top fuel dragster. And one of the things that they I remember hearing about is the impact on his orbital socket with the repeated launches with all the G-forces.
Check that out.
Was there anything from a long-term perspective on a pilot in the sense of numerous catapult launches as far as the impact on your body?
I don't know. I imagine that there could be. I don't know if anyone's ever studied. What I will say is these 5th generation fighters, there's a predominant amount of aviators who are coming down with very bad neurological disorders. To control these unbelievable computer machines, right? It's all through what's called the JHMICS, Joint Helmet Mounted Cueing System. So literally you put this helmet on and that's your interface into everything. It's quite amazing. But you're basically putting a microwave on your head, right? And then we gold plate everything. So any of those trons get stuck, you're basically sitting in a microwave cockpit, right? So they're having some significant neurological issues. As far as TBI, traumatic brain injury from repeated catapult shots, I don't know if it's ever been tested, to be honest with you. I can imagine it might, but I had already blown my brain up with rugby and everything. So I don't know if it really added too much to
That's why you got selected.
Yeah. He's a lab rat already. Go send him over there. So
the other question I had when you mentioned Gooch's size. So is there not a height and weight requirement or limits?
There are. I don't know him anymore, but it's not
6'2", 220 wasn't.
Well,
didn't exceed it.
You're approaching it. Unfortunately, Logan Allen, my friend Lurch, you're approaching weight because I think the gear's 45 pounds. I think the NATOPS, which is, wow, man, I'm pulling them all back. Naval Aviation Training Operations Procedure Standardization. We call it written in blood, right? So basically, here's the Tomcat. And here's probably a 500-page book of everyone who screwed something up. Put it in there so we don't do it again. Honestly, they say NATOPS is written in blood. So that there's a weight limit. I don't remember what it was. And the reason I bring up Lurch is it was a fight, and it was just a benign fight, and they're knocking it off. They go to the merge, and they're going, and they had a rudder hard over. And he was a big boy, 6'4". I don't know how much he weighed, but he didn't make it up the rails all the way, and so they think his body hit the vertical stabs when they had to eject at like 80 knot or 80 Gs. So it killed him instantaneously, and they went back and looked at it, and just a simple maintenance procedure of lubing the rails with the grease, everybody did it differently, and just having that much more grease than another one was the difference. And so they really started tracking weight limits with the gear on. As far as height goes, it's actually your hips to your knees, right? You had to have a certain, you couldn't go past a certain length because the way that the seat would eject, your femur bones are gone. So, yeah.
How long into your career? So after flight school in Pensacola, you go to San Diego?
Go to Miramar. And then I deployed out of Miramar. I got a Miramar squadron. Sometimes you don't. Like, you can go to Japan. Or you could go back to East Coast. It usually doesn't happen, right? They keep the East Coast people on the East Coast. But yeah, my squadron was out of Miramar. So I cruised, did a Westpac out of Miramar.
Getting selected for Top Gun.
Yeah.
You mentioned that there's no trophy, but is it a prestigious selection?
Yeah. I think everyone wants to be the best that they can be, right? And it's a pyramid, like anything is, right? And so as an aviator, as a tactical aviator, getting to the pinnacle of your profession is something that you strive for. Not everybody did, right? A lot of people, I want to be an astronaut. They wanted to be a test pilot, so they went to Pax River. Other people just love flying fighters, and they wanted to go and get their MBA or go to the War College and make it a career. And I just wanted to be the best at what I had chosen as a profession at that time, and I was driven to do that. I wasn't selected the first time. I got denied. I was pissed,
Now, do you submit an application as a two-man team, both?
No.
So you submit your application as the backseater. Somebody else submits their application as the front seater.
Yeah. And then there's a interview process, and, it's a big deal. And the Navy spends a lot of money to put us through that course. I'm going to say it's millions of dollars. I don't have a problem looking at, I think there was 38 flights. Our graduation strike was like a 8 or 10 V30. So they brought planes in from all over. They brought planes in from Nellis. Wink, wink. Some planes that you never thought you'd see before. Oh, shit! Oh, we're not in Russia.
It was just a duplicate copy.
Yes.
It's like the people who have a Corvette that they make it look like a Ferrari.
Copy watch. So, and then those guys can regenerate, right? So, and we got in so much trouble. God, we got in so much trouble. I can tell that story. There's a supersonic operating area in Fallon, Nevada. And there is a town called Austin, Nevada, in the middle of the supersonic area. And the government had subsidized their windows a lot. And the government
repeatedly
was tired of that, right? And so before we even walked out of the introductory brief, they said, there will be no supersonic flight violations, especially over Austin. Got it. So we're on the graduation strike, right? The last flight, we'd done it. And we take off. And so they had F-16Ns, which were just raped apes. They 2.0 easily indicated Mach number. They stripped it. It had the big mouth vipers. It was insane. So they go all the way out, basically over the Pacific, up to like 50, 60,000 feet. Fights on, and they just go, right? Well, I don't know. We might be being polluted, right? But the contrails are real, right? It's hot air going into cold moisture air, and that creates a condensation. So whether chemtrails are occurring or not, I'm like, those are planes. I don't know, but okay. Maybe they are chemtrailing us. I don't know. But they're coming at us, right? And so we might have been leaded. I don't know. I don't remember. But our job in the first section was to go and clear out everybody for the strike package to come in, right? So we're going down, and I run the radar up because you kind of have a clue that they're, you see them take off and go left. It's like, okay, they're going over the Pacific. And they came in at like 1.8 Mach, 50,000 feet, hauling the chili. And we go up to meet them. We shoot our missiles, turn around, run away. Okay, it's a dance. But as we're running away, we're in like 45-degree dives from 30,000 feet. Still an afterburner, and I'm a backseater. What are you going to do? I turn around and I'm like, wow, this is really cool looking, because they're starting to come down, and it's like basically 4 cigars with the trails behind it. And I unfortunately go, hey man, check it out, fellas. This is really cool. So we had 2 Hornets, which kind of crazy when you're in this like 60, 45-degree dive, going Mach, pointing straight towards the ground. You kind of look over and you're like, wow, this is kind of cool, And I can feel the energy that like everybody just kind of went, and yeah, that's kind of cool. Everybody forgot they're an afterburner. We have a 4-plane going through 10,000 feet. I think we're at 1.3 Mach, and we just blew every window in Austin. It was horrible. We didn't know, right? And I think someone's like, pull back, throttle back. Wow. Oh, shit. Literally, you can just feel this, and it just. So we come back and land. Remember Pete's Wicked Ale, the beer? Mm-hmm. Yeah. He was at our graduation strike. We didn't know that. We all just wanted to leave. We're done. And they say, hey, Pete's here. And we're like, great. Who cares? Get out of here. And he comes down and he's got this cooler. It's like this big. I'm like, Pete, and he puts it down. He goes, guys, that was the coolest thing I'd ever seen. And I'm Pete. And we're like, who cares? Pete from Pete's Wicked Ale. And we're like, whoa. And he's like starting to talk about microbrewing and everything. So the instructors come up, and it was 4 of us. They go, you guys got 15 minutes. Base skipper needs to see you now. And we're like, got it. And we went down to that cooler. I think I had like 4 or 5 beers in me when I went and saw him. So yeah, we got a lot of trouble for that. We had to go apologize to everyone. They loved it. It's like, I needed new windows anyway. Oh, okay. Well, sorry, we smashed them all. That's so many fun stories. We should do a Netflix special.
There you go.
Change the names to protect the innocent. So
these
are great stories, Paul. Sorry.
This
isn't necessarily a transition to get a job, but
I keep going back to the Top Gun movie and Buzz in the Tower. So
he would have lost his wings.
It's, and I would imagine to a degree when you're at a school like Top Gun, where the best of the best, there's got to be those times where even the instructors are like, let's see how good this pilot is.
It happens. And it's not talked about.
Yeah. But we all do it. Every one of us who's been in a specialized team or something. I remember going to SWAT school, and we had a competition 3-gun shooter in there. This guy could go through magazine changes. It was a work of art.
Yeah.
And there were times where the instructors would just load magazines and hand it to him. It's like, would you just run through like 4? It's just those little things that when you get to that level, for instance, you just said, I'm Pete. Who are you? Well, I'm Pete from Pete's Wicked Ale.
Yeah.
Oh, we like you. You're looking at him the way he's looking, like, you guys are Top Gun.
We're just a bunch of knuckleheads.
You're Pete. You're the beer guy.
That's right. Yeah.
So it's
just a bunch of knuckleheads, really. And we saw ourselves that way.
I heard you explain, and I really like this explanation. Top Gun isn't to necessarily make you better pilots. Mm-hmm. It's to make you better teachers.
Correct.
To go back to the squadron and make the squadron better. And I've never heard that analogy before.
Yeah, that's what it's all about, actually. You want your aircrew beating you. You don't like it, right? It's not supposed to happen, right? But that means you've done your job, right? So, what was really great is I went back to the Fleet Replacement Squadron, and it was just at the time that we were starting to use the Lantern Pod to drop bombs, LGBs, and I had been trained up on that. I'd been trained up on harm, all this different stuff. So I was able to bring in a lot of requisite knowledge that got the brand new, we called them Category 1s. They're brand new, never been on a cruise, just got winged, Cat 1, Cat 2, Cat 3, Cat 4, like a Cat 4 is like a CAG, a captain. He's never, he's might fly every once in a while. We called them seagulls. Got to throw rocks at them to get them to fly. But that's not their job. They're not to be tactical aviators. They're supposed to run the air wing, right?
You've been there, done that, now get out of the way.
Yeah, they go in the day hop, and it's like they don't know how to run the FLIR. They can't run the radar, and they might be able to pull 3 Gs, and they're going to pass out. So we got you, CAG. Go get your day hop, and we got it, right? But, when you look at that, I was able to bring back a significant amount of new tactics that they needed to know, or they weren't going to be helpful to that squadron coming in. So we rewrote the air-to-ground syllabus. We wrote the basic fighter maneuver syllabus. I think we kept the ACM the same, but the Tomcat's role was completely shifting from a blue water, shoot the bears and badgers from the Russians 2,000 miles, war at sea, to a littoral bombing platform. And so having gone through Top Gun, coming back to what we called the schoolhouse, that was, I think, a really important part in the Tomcat's lineage, because me and Cal were able to bring in a lot of those tactics and techniques that had not atrophied, but they really weren't that important. But now it had to happen. So we rewrote everything. Very entrepreneurial. I got out at 11 years.
That's where I want to focus now. Yeah. So you went to Top Gun at how many years in?
6 or 7.
And you were already thinking that I am not doing a career.
No, not at all. And I think a lot of guys are like that. They're ready. Let me see what the next set of orders are, But when you get to that point, at that really demarcation point, that's when you're really thinking about it. So I was very conflicted to get out or stay in. Yeah.
What would have kept you in?
I wish somebody would have said, go take some time out of the cockpit, right? Go to the Monterey, get a master's, or not necessarily go to the Pentagon, but I was too cocky and egotistical to probably even listen to him. But I wish that I might have been able to listen a little bit more. Like my CAG said, you should not make a career-ending move on cruise, right? I don't know what the analogy would be for a first responder or a policeman, but I was 4 months into cruise. I probably was psychotic being away from my family and living with 5,000 men. You know what I mean? I'm like, I'm out. Can you wait 2 more months before you make that decision? Probably should have. But again, that's not necessarily my personality. I'm more of I'm out. And God, that was a dumb idea, but I got to figure it out now.
The analogy I can put in law enforcement would be a recently promoted, maybe sergeant or even potentially a lieutenant, who gets shoved back on weekend night shift.
Right.
And just absolutely hates it. Like, what was the point of spending the last 10, 12 years getting to this point to now be back on graveyard with all the junior officers and living like a vampire? And I could see like not being able to see just beyond this deployment, get through this. And then if you're still not liking the job, then make the decision, as opposed to, no, the job is horrible.
I was too egotistical and headstrong to have been able to see that. And I wish I wasn't. So if someone's listening to this, whether they're a first responder, a policeman, or someone who's active duty, right? Cool your jets a little bit, right? You probably know what the decision is, but don't be rash about making it. Guilty. But hey, I'm here,
Did you have a plan for what you were going to do at that point in time?
No. I'll figure it out. Dumb. Yeah. My one plan was I wanted to get as far away from the Navy as I could, because I didn't want it to define me. I love the United States Navy. I love the men and women who serve it. I love the republic that they represent. I love it, right? And I will never talk bad about the Navy. It has defined me. It has molded me, and it has given me some of the greatest friendships and experiences of my life, right? But it was just time for me to leave. I knew that, right? And it was funny too. I was coming down. It was a pinky landing, so the sun is just set or it's about to set, but it counts. And I probably was in the CAG's back seat as a night landing. One night, right? Wow, CAG's on the pinky landing. Imagine that. And I just sat back, and literally we were probably 2 miles behind the ship, and everything's working. And I'm just like, that's it. Boom, debriefed, took my gear off, got a slider, walked into the CAG's office, handed him my letter. I go, hey, I'm quitting. He's, where did this come from? We were just flying. I'm like, did
I do it that bad?
Yeah, I'm done, And he's like, I don't think you should make that decision. Probably should have listened to him, but I'm glad I didn't. And the other thing he said was, well, Bart, some people get out of the Navy for the good of the Navy, and they're going to help the Navy. And so I am drawn to supporting our men and women who are veterans making this transition, and police officers and first responders, anybody who's in that for service over for profit. That's my passion. It really is. And we'll see what happens.
Did you consult your wife at all when you made that decision?
She has always been, still is, and quite frankly, always will be very supportive of me. She wasn't going to put any input in it because she never wanted me to come back and say, you were the one who told me to get out.
Got it.
It was a very hard decision because I had a great career going and I loved it too.
Were you in San Diego at the time?
No, Virginia Beach. So we took all the Tomcats to Virginia Beach to single-sided them, which was great for the community. It really was.
So when did you get out?
2001, April of 2001. And I tried to get back in 9/12/2001. Went all the way up to SINCPAC, who was a friend of mine, Admiral Doran. And it's business. Right? I'm thinking I'm a FAC A, Top Gun graduate, strike lead, but my year group had moved forward 6 or 7 months. And I was out of rotation. And he's like, look, there's really nowhere that we can plug you in for continuing your career. And I'm like, Admiral, don't you see I'm not really a career guy? It's just, I want to go fight. That's what I did, He's like, Bart, ain't going to happen. Go do good. So I was in the reserves at the time when 9/11 hit. And I was at the Pentagon and I hated it, right? I was like some watch commander, like, where's the frigate, blah, blah, blah. And I'm like, what the hell's a frigate? I'll find out. I'm like, what am I doing? You
were assigned to the Pentagon, but were you on duty or at the Pentagon?
Yeah. At the Navy Command Center. Not on 9/11, no.
Okay.
No. But I was at the Navy Command Center and I'm like, I can't do this. And I just started a virtual reality software company, knew nothing about virtual reality or software. And I was just like, this dog don't hunt. I got to cut the cord. So I cut it totally, like 13 years. Wish I would have done 7 more as a reservist. I could have, but whatever.
So how does virtual reality software come to your radar?
Yeah, well, I met a guy who was a Hornet driver, John Claggett, Rooster. He's Top Gun, in charge of Top Gun. He was like a Top Gun training officer. And he was starting a company, and he asked the Bubba Network, hey, you know anybody? We lived 2 miles from each other in Leesburg, Virginia. He's like, hey, you want to help start a company? I'm like, sure. I know nothing about it. I know nothing about software. He's like, we'll figure it out. That was a shit show, but... And we did virtual reality 20 years too early. I knew a lot about it. I look at them now. I'm like, oh, okay, I can see what they're doing. They've done nothing differently.
What were you designing the software to do?
Training. So a lot of times when you go on cruise, it's money, right? And a lot of the weapons, boxes, whatever you're going to call them, they don't go back to the land. And a lot of times, hey, I might be an air-to-air guy for 3 weeks straight. And then all of a sudden I'm on an air-to-ground mission. I haven't touched a lantern in 3 weeks. It's like, crap. So our concept was take game-based software, replicate the jet. And we made the first, this is, again, from the transition perspective, what are people wanting to buy from you? It sounds so obvious. But when you're in the deep, deep depths of a startup and you got credit cards maxed out and you're just incapable of going and looking around. We made the first ever USB HOTAS, hands-on throttle and stick, flight controls. Because your interface with the jet's the stick and throttle, right? And so that was the concept. 5 or 6 laptops, put them in like the Intel Center or something. Guy's got a lantern pod flight. You can go walk down before he flies and just boot it up. Just kind of get the finger fire, it's probably the same way. Everything's process driven. Probably that way when you were a SWAT, right? So boom, you do this, and you hate that hesitancy moment where doubt or questions come in, and then you've lost that moment to strike, right? You can't do that when you're going 500 miles an hour and you're about to deliver a bomb. It's got to be second nature. So that was our concept, deployable training devices. And it worked for a while. We did the Predator, we did a UAV, we did the F-15, we did the F-16, we did the F-18, and then we got squashed. And we were incapable of taking our bags off and realized that Boeing, Grumman, Raytheon, even though we were like a $5 million little software company, we were a complete threat to their entire training regime. And we were getting too behind the doors. And we just got fucked. Sorry, we just did. Lesson learned. So we were able to exit, pay off a lot of company debt, paid off a lot of credit cards. I think I got like a $7,000 check. Positive. So I am a very average entrepreneur. Yep. Yeah.
I'll leave it to you in the stages you then went afterwards to what you're doing today. And like I said, I'm going to overgeneralize it and basically doing stock market analysis or market analysis.
Yeah.
But the one thing I do want to, your transition back into civilian life. Now you did have the reserves kind of in your back pocket and kept doing that. But what was that initial transition like for you, just being back into the civilian world?
Really hard. I wouldn't admit it at the time. I might not have realized it at the time, right? I was somewhat in survival mode. I was trying to survive my persona that I had in the Navy, right? Like I go from briefing 4-star admirals on, hey, here's the strike plan. I'm telling you, Admiral, what we're going to do, and $1 billion strike package, to walking around in a suit trying to sell internet-y business wireless research to people that don't want to talk to me and don't give a shit about what I do, right? Or I did. So I didn't do very well at that transition. And so it was really hard, but I was in survival mode. So I really didn't take the time to go, dude, you're not doing this right. I didn't. And so it was somewhat of I call it my lost decade, quite frankly. I drank too much. I wallowed in self-pity. And I mean, the startup was basically a failure, right? We made some money, paid salaries, but it didn't go as we thought it would go. And then you got to pivot, I mean, it was a shit show for a while. And I sunk. I sunk. But I think I got to maybe 8 fingers. Right? I had 2 left. All right. And my wife was with me the whole time. And what's funny is I refused to let people know how much I was struggling in these business adventures because I had these 3 beautiful daughters and I was their coach, and on the outside, it was awesome. Right. But it was a big mask. Yeah.
I guess 2 points for that, or in the sense of
from Top Gun to business failure.
It sounds like a made for TV
I know.
movie.
I'm like, maybe that should be our Netflix. But how did we get all the insanity into? Anyway,
where I want to get to is, where did those 2 points merge? So you talked about everything that you were battling, the emotional aspect of it, yeah. But then there had to be that pivot to where success, or at least what you perceived as like, hey, I've gotten out of this and now I'm moving forward. When does that happen?
2 years ago.
Taking your time.
Actually, when we moved out to San Diego, right?
And what prompted the move?
Well, business. My boss at the time is my brother-in-law. It was our 3rd business. We're working together. He's awesome, right? And he gets me. I was doing a lot of business development out of California, and I had a company out of the Bay Area, and I was in their boardroom. And I called in our people from Raleigh, North Carolina. See where I'm going with this? San Francisco, Raleigh.
They mesh.
Yeah, great. So I told Mark, I said, hey, if we're going to do business, we got to be out here, right? We got to have a presence. And he's like, you want to go out there? And I was like, yeah, maybe. Called the wife. She goes, San Diego. And he said, be out there in 6 months. So we knew we needed to change the surroundings. I needed to. And I followed my wife out. And since then, it's been completely different.
When did you get into the whole market analysis?
Great question. No.
Explain it better what it actually is.
So I'm
Bart's charts, right?
Yeah, I love it. It's my passion.
It's numbers.
It's all numbers. Even the very hair on your head is numbered. Ever heard that one before?
No.
Jesus, Bible, he says that. Anyway, we can go deep, and I don't want to unless you do. So you just pull me back.
Give me the wave tops.
It's actually virtual reality software related. I'm up trying, and we actually did because he saw the vision to sell to the Ohio Air National Guard with Jeff Lay. Call sign easy, not bad. There's other call signs, but I'll just leave it. Make it PG-13. But Jeff's a great guy. Unbelievable story with him. But he saw it. And so we were like, hey, your students show up for training in the Viper, and it's all on a laptop. All their academics, all their flights. And then we took the DTED data for the graphics, and we created all their training zones, all their bombing areas and everything. So the students can come in and fly all the flights and everything. He's like, I get it. And so I'm talking to him about it, and all of a sudden this Aruga goes off. What the hell was that? He's like, you don't want to know. You should have listened to him. God, I should have listened to him. I think I'm starting to see a trend here by being, I should have listened to the people who are talking. And I come around a corner, and it's a chart of technical analysis. I'm like, easy, what is that? And I got to tell you, Paul, I was like, I was like transfixed on it. It's like, oh, it's the euro versus the yen. I'm like, the who and the who? I didn't know anything about this. And he's like, you don't want to know. I'm like, yeah, I do. And that just started this incredible.
Was this just a hobby of his, or was this his?
Hobby of his. Yeah, it still is. He's incredible. I'm not really sure where it came from. And the reason I'm getting so serious, people on the podcast were like, why is he bringing this up? Because something told me that the market, whatever it is, stocks, bonds, commodities, foreign currencies, stops at a number for a reason, right? And so I started down the traditional technical analysis route of moving averages, oscillators, candlesticks, all that stuff. And then I thought to myself, well, I want to be a patch wearer. And so I told Easy, I go, there's got to be like a certification for this. And he's like, let's find it. So it's called a chartered market technician. If you Google CMT, it's like certified massage therapist.
Country music television.
Yeah. And there's a concrete metal tester or something. Not a lot of chartered market technicians, right? But I was like, so there's CMT 1, CMT 2, CMT 3. And, in order to fly the Tomcat, you have to build it. It's very technical oriented, right? And then they get to Top Gun, you have to like envision it. If I put my mind to it, I can do anything. All of us can. That's actually a lot to do with where I'm going. We'll get there, right? And so I was like, I'm going to figure this out. So Easy and we did the CMT 1. I failed the CMT 2. That was horrible. And then the CMT 3 is modeled after the CFA, Chartered Financial Analyst. You see that a lot. And the CMT 3 was incredible. I think it was like 20 charts. You're the portfolio manager of a multinational charity. Come up with the best way to, deploy the portfolio across these 20 charts. Euro bonds, Chinese stock market, the Dow in yen. It's just all this stuff, right? And there's all intermarket technical analysis. Excuse me. So it's this dance between bonds and currencies and equities and commodities. And it's just a flow of funds, right? And so CMT3, you were really able to put it together. And that resonated with strike packages and strike leads, right? It's like, okay, what's going on here, right? So I passed that. And I still wasn't making hardly any money. And I was getting, and a lot of it was my mindset, right? And then just crumbles just get put in your path if you can see them. And that dove me into Fibonacci. I never even knew who the dude was, right? And then once you go to Fibonacci, you're like, whoa. And then that sent me into sacred geometry, right? And I was like, okay, what's this sacred geometry? I'd never heard of any of this. And then that turned me into musical theory. I'm like, musical theory? Whoa, okay. And then that went into numerology. That went into the Kabbalah. That went into Pythagorean theorem, Plato, and the Bible.
Is this all a personal journey or is this a business journey?
Personal.
Okay.
Yeah. I actually started a CTA. So I was a commodity trading advisor for foreign currencies. And I was trying to raise money. At one point, I was the number 3 foreign currency trader in the world with assets less than $20 million. And I'd come in and, okay, so how are you deploying capital? Sacred geometry and music. Get out. Huh? Because I'd never taken an economics course. I'd never taken a business course at Navy, right? So to me, I'm like, yeah, it's all vibration, right? It's all patterns. No, that doesn't go over well. I've been to Wall Street so many times trying to raise money. Finally, I'm like, oh, screw it. So it ended up being my red pill to help me understand the nature of our reality. I'll let that sink in. Sorry, this is a transition podcast, but I'm being dead serious.
I like the personal journey aspect of it. And I think
I'm not done either.
I think for a lot of people, balancing that learning aspect, but then really being open to learning more about yourself and turning it back inside and how it actually can benefit you.
Yeah. It's my hero's journey, right? I have discovered the nature of our reality through the stock market. And it's because even the very hairs on your head are numbers, right? All is vibration. And some of the most powerful cycles that exist are biblical cycles, and they're the age of the Pharaohs. Like Noah, that's a Venus and Saturn cycle. Exact, right? You go into the Old Testament and you just start, the information just starts coming to you, right? The tribe of light is described in Leviticus exactly equal to the speed of sound in meters per second. The tribe of, the speed of light. So they're like, oh, and the tribe of light numbers this many people. It's exactly equal to the speed of light, meters per second, in the Old Testament. Right? You just start seeing all of the construct of reality. And you go into the Kabbalah, the Quran. I just finished a book, Plato and the Quran, and it's just the same story over and over again. It's the same numbers over and over again. And all of a sudden you're just like, I got it.
So once you learn that pattern or can identify that pattern,
you're good. Doesn't work. Doesn't happen. Doesn't work all the time. It's not going to. I tell people, oh, it works 100% of the time for me. And they're like, oh, you can't be right 100% of the time. I'm like, I know where I'm wrong. It's all about knowing when you're wrong and cutting the loss. I don't know which pattern will work or which one won't. Kind of crazy, but 313, because it was close to 314 pi. Anyway, 18,059 days from last Wednesday was the all-time low in the New York Stock Exchange Index. The New York Stock Exchange Index went up and tagged 18,059 days after its all-time low. I thought that was going to be a pretty big high. I don't think it's the high. It blew through it. I'm shocked because that's a massive pattern called a square up, right? I'm like, wow, we don't know which ones are going to work and which ones aren't. I think it's going up about another 3%, and then we'll top because there's another huge pattern up there. But people will ask you, like, well, what is that, the GDP? I'm like, I don't even know what that means, right? They're just numbers to me. If there's an earnings call or a Fed announcement, it's just numbers. Sorry.
No. So my question is, the pattern is completely independent of external influence, or the numbers are. So when you mention, I don't even know what the GDP is.
Yeah,
so what you're saying is that has no bearing on once you understand this pattern or this, is it safe to call it a rhythm of numbers?
Oh, it's music.
Look at me getting on the board.
I know. I was like, oh, we got it. How do you say this? Of course it has something to do with it, right? Like yesterday, the trend right now is going up in the euro, right? Against the dollar. The Fed announced that they could potentially make 3 cuts next year. The market exploded on that, right? It blew through a pattern. Okay, right? Predominantly, the patterns will hit 3 or 4 or 5 days prior to a news event. Like you're already short. Like I'm already short KRE. The regional banks are in trouble. Period. End of sentence. They have not rallied at all during this thing, right? So there probably will be, or not, and I'll get stopped out. Oh, well, right. That was a big deal, right? That losses are part of this. Aviation, SWAT team, lost, you're dead. So it took a long time for me to accept the fact that I did everything I could. I discovered that 18,059 days ago, and price was hitting 18,059 at the same time. It worked for 2 days. It hit it exactly and went down. It got smoked. Wow, that was a lot of work to find that level. Crap, it didn't work. Oh well, on to the next one, right? So that energy, if you will, right, can be affected by what I call fundamental news announcements, of course, earnings calls, everything. But ultimately, it really won't have an effect on the overall trend.
So when you expand out and you look at it long term, you're going to have a blip.
Yeah.
But it's not going to impact the pattern.
Correct. If you look at like the New York Stock Exchange Index on a monthly chart, 1987 hardly even shows up. Right? It's like a little small candle in the realm of a big thing, right? So for me, and again, it's like business, right? Find what works for you, right? I already said I really don't like the 1v1s. It was chaotic. Someone's going to hit you. It's just, the pilots loved it, right? This sucks. I'm not good in a 5-minute, 10-minute day trading. It's like ACM. I'm good at the long-range setups, right? So knowing that there's an earnings announcement or knowing that there's a Fed coming and knowing that hopefully I gotten in a better level than just entering on an emotion, I can set my stop to deal with that standard deviation of what a monthly standard deviation is and ride out that emotional euphoria that's going to end. So of course, the fundamentals matter. I don't understand them. I've never studied them. And it makes it just a whole heck of a lot easier to say, hey, there's a buy pattern, put in the buy order, and it gets run over. Okay, I know where I was wrong. I knew what I was going to lose. On to the next one. So, of course, but I don't track them. I have no idea when the earnings announcements are, or the CPI or any of that stuff. I just don't care.
Boiling it down, though, to the basics.
Yeah.
If I'm interpreting it correctly, you really didn't enjoy your time as a math major.
I did not.
But by being immersed in it, you are definitely more advanced in math and having a degree in it, even a 2.08 GPA. 2.0 and go. For someone to get into this, to go down the realm of a CMT and take the CTA test.
Yeah. Hard.
Do you need to have a math background?
No, not at all.
Do you even need to have an interest in math to go down this?
No. Maybe a little, but no. What I tell people, and I can email you if you want to put it, but it's called Michael Schneider, and it's I don't think it's an idiot's guide, but it's basically a guide to creating the universe, a journey through the numbers 1 through 12, right? And he takes the number 1, and it's all pictures. It's writing, but it's all pictures.
1 is the loneliest number.
Who was that?
It's from
Mamas and the Papas.
Is it from the 60s?
Yeah.
Or early 70s?
That might be right. I don't know. We just dated ourselves. But it takes 1, 2, 3, and it goes through the history of it, why it's important, shows its nature, but it's all the patterns that these numbers create. And so I tell people, go buy this book, $13, whatever, it's paperback. If you can't put it down, call me, right? Because you're being drawn to the pattern, right? I can teach you the math later. But if you're like, whatever, stop. Go no more. I've just saved you tens of thousands of dollars. I imagine I probably spent about $100,000 on this education. I've sought out mentors, guys and gals who just have been doing it for 30, 40 years and made it and how they do it. And, you know, I started out with basic tactics. It's like Top Gun, right? And then you end up, I'm reading this book right now called The 32nd Jewel by Constance Brown. She's incredible, brilliant lady, wonderful lady. And it's Top Gun. And it's musical theory. It's matrix theory. It's the law of vibration. I mean, it is heady stuff, right? But to think I came from a moving average to here, and I just kept doing it, right? And you just want to climb the pyramid. That has a lot to do with it, by the way, but we can get into that later. So, and I think I'm a lifelong learner. I can't get enough of this experience called life. And I just trying to understand why that number was causing that resistance or support, taking that red pill and going into the Bible, going into the Kabbalah, going into numerology, astrology, astronomy, right? Going into it all. That is the epic of humanity in the story of life. And so what it's actually done has increased my spirituality and my belief in the architect and God. And I'm connected to you and I'm one with you. And then it really blew out with my work with mental health with veterans. I'll pause there and let you digest.
Just the one last question.
That's why we need to go on. That's why I needed to go on this podcast.
Just the one last question related to this from a business standpoint.
Yeah.
If somebody was to, because I'm assuming it's kind of like getting a certification to be a stockbroker, or is that the realm that somebody would get this certification in and operate in, is in the stock market industry?
Yeah. Family office, Morgan Stanley, trading desk, right? And what's funny is it's kind of like I'm a SUP surfer, right? And all the prone surfers hate us, but we catch all the waves. Everyone poo-poos technical analysis and technicians and everything. But have you ever seen on CNBC, Squawk Box or whatever, what's there? Charts. Everybody's looking at the charts. So it's like, why are you giving us such a hard time, right? So if you're involved in any financial type of business, the chartered market technician qual will help you tremendously, right? It will help you tremendously to do your job, to manage risk, because that's all we're really doing. We have no idea what'll work or what won't. All we could, there's a book by Michael Douglas or Mark Douglas. Every market moment's unique. You don't have to know what's going to happen next in the market to make money, right? I mean, it is chaos, but in the chaos comes form, right? And so you just got to learn how to manage risk, and you manage risk by using technical analysis on charts. So if you're going to go manage someone's money, or you're going to go give stock tips, or you're going to go to a trading desk or whatever, why wouldn't you learn that price and time thing that you're looking at to the best of your ability? So I think it's very applicable. It's just one of those things where guys who've been prone surfing all their life and have spent 5 hours reading a Goldman Sachs report on Apple, where I look at a chart and in 20 minutes I can go, okay, that's what I do. Right. So it's just different. Well, did I answer your question?
No, you did. And with that, when you mention it seems like chaos, everything seems like chaos when you're on the outside looking in and you don't understand it.
Yeah.
You could be in the middle of an air-to-air situation. Somebody on the ground, that's chaos up there.
Yeah.
But when you're in control and you know what's coming, or you can anticipate your opponent's maneuver, it's not chaos.
Yes.
When a police officer or a firefighter is in the middle of an engulfed fire, they understand the patterns of how something's going to evolve.
Yeah.
My very limited knowledge with delving into the stock market, early 2000s, for whatever reason, I got a bug to start kind of learning it. And you talk about watching the numbers and really starting to look at stocks just from their trading averages. And all of a sudden you see that pattern, like, whoa, wait a minute, that one jumped today. And now you just start watching it. And then sure enough, within a day or two, news will come out.
Yeah.
And it's just understanding those patterns.
Yeah. And it's human behavior. It's the cycle of greed and fear, right? And it's all cycles. All cycles. Yeah.
Very interesting.
Yeah.
So let's pivot now. Let's talk about, how'd you get into stand-up paddleboarding?
My wife, right? So we left Northern Virginia, and I don't want to paint the picture that I was a walking basket case. It was never that, right? But I was definitely not necessarily as happy as I could be, or definitely not as happy as I am now. Keywords being I am. We'll get to that later if you want. But she says, now that we're out here, you got to go do something, right? And I was like, you're right. And she says, what are you going to do? And I was like,
I'll figure it out.
Well, kind of, but a friend of mine who was a Navy guy had been SUP surfing. And I just kind of came into me. I'm like, I'm going to teach myself to stand up paddleboard surf. And I think she did it on purpose, like just to piss me off. So I would definitely do it, right? Or she really is like, oh God. So it was a spontaneous decision. So we went up to Oceanside, bought a board, and you know where the Del Mar racetrack is, that little gully? Put the board in there. They walked away. I was so bad. They walked away. It was horrible. I couldn't stand on things to save my life. I'm falling over. And just like, oh, this is bad. It was really bad. So I just kept going out. And that's actually being on this podcast I'm doing this, 5 years later, I'm in Maldives, SUP surfing 10, 15 foot faces. I've started a nonprofit. We've put 60 vets through with my partners. Holy shit. I couldn't even stand on this thing. It was bad, Paul, really bad. And it kind of gives me some credibility when guys come down and I'm like, hey, trust me. You guys are going to catch a wave. Everybody has caught a wave. People never step foot on a surfboard. By about Wednesday or Thursday, they're catching waves. The instructors are so great. But I'm like, I guarantee you I was worse than you. And it's the most humbling, but I just kept doing it. And, we were out 3 weeks ago with Jeff Engel, who's on the show. He's my voucher. Remember the jerk? As long as you got a voucher, Mrs. Nussbaum. I got on a triple overhead out on pipes. Triple overhead.
Now, right? What's a triple overhead for those?
It was 3 times above my head.
Oh.
Yeah. It was probably a 12, 15 foot face wave. And I was in control and I surfed it. 5, 6, 7 years ago, I think it was 6 years ago, I couldn't even stand on it, right? It was just like, but what I realized is that is my catapult shot. Every drop I do, I don't care if it's a knee-high wave or an overhead wave, it feeds the adrenaline. I saw something, Robert Edward Grant is just blowing the doors out of so much stuff right now. And he talked about whether light moves. And he's like, think about the wave in the stadium, right? You stand up when the wave hits you and then you sit down, right? So is the energy moving or are you just moving up and down? I was like, oh. So I was out there on the wave. Through the medium of water, we're on the energy of Earth. And surfers, they get so crazy and people are like, why are they so crazy? Well, I can tell you now that you truly are. I go back to, we might be surfing an echo of the Big Bang, right? And so now I see the wave coming and I no longer see water of a wave. I see energy propagating through. And so you're on this surfboard. The only thing between you and that energy is the surfboard and the water. And you get this mosaic in front of you of pure natural law, pure natural vibration and energy. And then you as a human it's very spiritual and it's a very technical, right? Because you're constantly looking at angles and everything. And then you set yourself up and God's given you this tapestry to go create on. Hang 10, bottom turn it, and it's just the greatest feeling in the world. And it changed my life.
And not even to boil it down or undersell it, but when you talk about the spiritual side of surfing, show me a surfer who's stressed out or tie strung.
It's a great point, isn't it?
I
don't know if you have. Like, true confession, I know I needed to be on this podcast today. Still haven't gotten there. Maybe we will, but I'm not going to force it. But I almost canceled because it is so perfect right now. I looked at my son's like, Dad, we going tonight? I'm like, I got a podcast. I got to do this podcast. God, it looks good. And I'm like, maybe I can get back and get it. I'll just go tomorrow morning. But it's changed my life. And, we get these vets down there and they're poked and prodded, right? It's hard to describe what we do. I might get teary now because I'm really trying to give you the impact, not of what I'm doing, but just like where we're at as a society and mental health. And I think people have forgotten how to have fun, and it's okay to have fun. So we had this SEAL names, and I guess I can say faces, but he won't be able to say, but names will be, held off to protect the innocent. But the first night we have people, just show up and it'd be like you had first responders, cops, and vets. First responders would be there, vets would be there, cops would be there. Happens all the time. By Wednesday, everybody's together, right? So first night, it's like, all right, and everyone's kind of like, I'm like, okay, come on, guys, relax. But, and I just tell them, I go, by Wednesday, this is a group. Don't worry, But he goes, you guys created a safe space. And we all started laughing. We're like, come on, man, we don't want to talk about that shit, safe spaces. And this guy is a Master Chief, still in Navy SEAL. He's like, no. He goes, you don't know how powerful it is to create a space where men and women can come and relax. And
human nature, we like our bubble.
Yeah, right. And it's uncomfortable for people to take their pack off. And we tell them, like, you're here for a week. You have no wife or husband. You're amongst veterans. No one's going to be poking and prodding you. You don't want to talk? Don't talk. You want to talk? Talk. But we're here to enjoy each other and enjoy the ocean. And let's go, right? And so we just create this environment of trust because that's our energy, right? And so to see people laugh the way they've laughed, right? There was one guy, he was a combat medic in the Battle of Fallujah, and he said, I have really bad PTSD. I said, I'm really sorry you have that. I'm never going to tell you that again. And I'm like, should I even done that? I had one priest who had left the army and became a priest. He goes, and I'm not like, I run this nonprofit. Me and my partner, Wes and Whit, Navy SEAL, Army Ranger. I won't say that he won a Silver Star because he gets pissed because he's really humble. Sorry, I said it. But he's one of the most incredible men you'll ever meet. And we just wanted to give back, right? And these people call and they just start opening up, and you have to be present, and you want to be present. And at the same time, you have to be sympathetic but not empathetic. You can't take that energy on, man, because it's heavy, right? So I had a priest say, I want to kill myself. And I'm like, well, I don't think that would go very well with your congregation. And he just bursts out laughing, and I'm like, laugh more, Father. He's like, man, I'm taking it too seriously, aren't I? I'm like, I'm not going to tell you you aren't, but yeah, and so I think what we're able to do is just bring a level of humanity and laughter and just, all right, guys, take the pack off, right? Just take it off and surf. And we get out there and laugh. And Joel caught his first wave, and I paddled over. And here's this guy, Joel. He was sick as a dog. So there had been this huge hurricane that came in the week prior. We kind of checked the water quality now. We hadn't. It was like our third retreat. I mean, people were going down. Montezuma's revenge. He's like, I'm catching a wave. He'd paddle 100 yards away from us, and we'd hear him throwing up or having diarrhea. He'd take his shit off, go like that, put it back on, come over. Kind of smelled a little bit, but really, he's like, I'm catching a wave. So he caught his wave. I paddled over to him. He jumped in the water. I jumped in the water, gave him a hug. We both were crying like crazy. He pushes me away. And I'm like, what? He's like, this is the first time I've been present since the Battle of Fallujah. And I looked at him and I went, you can only be present on the wave. You have to. God's given you that opportunity to have nothing but pure energy for you to do whatever you want. Fall on your ass, be a good sort, right? But you're not thinking of a single thing. Work, wife, kids, buddies downrange. You are present. And I think that is the big thing. It's like we create this environment where people are present. And then, I mean, I have some conversations that are just incredible, but I'm just listening, right? They're like, you know what? I'm having fun. I need to get this shit off my chest. I just, you know, oh, that sucks. And they just unload. And they're like, thanks. And a lot of times I'm like, you got it, man. I'm like, I didn't say a word, you know? So the world's awash in a mental health crisis, right? And I tell the guys the first night, and I don't know, usually about half of them do it. I say, just one, they have to pay for the flight, right? And oh, by the way, we've opened it up for first responders and police. So we'd love to have our brothers and sisters down. Why not? Right? Come on, let's go have a good time. But I tell them, I go, one time, that's all I want from you. I want you to look yourself in the mirror, deep. I want you to smile. And I want you to say thank you. 3 out of 10 do it. And then I say, well, why didn't you do it? I'm not worthy. I'm like, well, when you're worthy and you finally do it, text me. Because you are, right? These guys don't even want to look at themselves in the mirror. I'm like, do it, man. It's okay, right? So, and then we do a paddle out Friday morning before dark, and no one's allowed to speak. Not allowed. You know, we're like, hey, we asked for silence. And then we give Michelle the night before. My wife does crystal bowls at night. And it's not a religious thing or anything. It's like, we're on the water twice a day, heat, video review. People are wiped. And we're like, come on, we'll play some bowls and for about half an hour and call it a night. You go watch, you know, a bunch of Mexicans sing Michael Jackson. It's great. They're awesome. And this resort treats us so well. But they have all these concerts at night. And it's so funny. That's not Michael Jackson, you know. And we do this paddle out, and it's powerful. And our big thing is either bring something back or leave something here. But live. And that's our saying, surf, live, right? The other thing at the end of the dinner, and this is kind of where we're going, and this is the whole stock market stuff. It's all tied together. There's one other piece that I'd love to talk about too, that really blew my mind open. But I say, it's not that hard, right? I'm an extremely spiritual person, but I'm not a Bible beater or a thumper, right? I've read the Bible a lot because I'm looking for the numbers, right? But I think it's pretty easy. Number one, love your God, whatever God that is for you, right? Love your God with all your heart and all your mind and all your soul, right? Number two, love your neighbor as yourself. What I think is missing between 1 and 2 is we're all connected. Humanity is connected. We are all connected, right? So if you love your God with all your heart, all your mind, and all yourself, you've got to love yourself, right? And if you love your neighbor just as much, you got to love yourself because your neighbor is you, right? And so what we're trying to do is just get people to understand, give yourself some grace. It's okay. It's the human condition, and everything is neutral. Everything's going to be okay, right? And so we count the laughs also, right? And in our little pitch, we're like, laughter. We just have veterans laughing. To land this plane, the guy who talked at the beginning wrote a testimonial, and the last words he wrote was, "You taught me to be happy again." And all it was just being happy, right? So if we can just touch each person each day with a little bit of happiness. COVID-19 was evil, but that's our playbook to spread love too, right? One person gave me COVID. Why can't I give that person love and they pass it around? It's time. And so the real healing, the real blowing open and everything was entheogenic medicines and psychedelics. So I'm also on the board of directors for Behind Thin Lines, and we are advocating. We're at the Hill all the time. And it doesn't have to be psychedelics, different modalities, right? To help you make a conscious choice to be the best person you can be. So we advocate, we're doing research, we have doctors on staff, and then we're also providing funds for ceremonies if someone wants to do that, right? I love it. I love it so much, right? my journey. I did it. I don't think I needed to. Again, my brother Wiz, No Fallen Heroes, look him up. What he's doing is unbelievable. I was able to do a ceremony with him. It literally was like, because aviators are killing themselves. Two weekends ago, I was on the phone with a friend who was sprinting up the Patuxent River. A guy had holed himself in a room, right? His wife had left him and everything. And he's all like, oh man, get to him, and we did. But these medicines are extremely powerful. And I would just recommend that people don't necessarily poo-poo them and look at them as potentially life-saving mental health therapies. And so I'm all about it, right? But I'm also about just basic meditation. And we're all figuring it out. We're all connected. And, behind thin lines, I hope some of the first responders and policemen, are watching this, to look us up, right? Because we're a great group. But that's my passion. And what's funny is when I got the opportunity to do a psychedelic experience, hopefully my mom's not watching. I haven't told her yet. I told my brothers and sisters, it's like, you what? I'm like, yeah, I had no idea. I had no idea what I was getting into, right? Zero. And I wanted to understand why I had my lost decade. What happened there, right? I put golf clubs through my basement wall a couple times. I had a horrible temper, and I'm like, this is not me. I drank hard. And the whole time, the guilt and shame came out because of this beautiful wife and these kids. And then on the outside, everybody thinks everything's great. It wasn't, right? That's my fault. I didn't let anybody know. So let someone know. You'd be shocked just letting someone know does to it, right? And it happens down at the retreat. Hey, Bart, I'm really having a tough time. What's going on, man? He did, thank you for that. Sure. I didn't say a word. I was just there holding space, letting the guy talk, right? But I wanted to understand that. But what I didn't tell Wiz, he knows now, I wanted to understand the Great Pyramids. So as you're getting ready for this experience, my guide was Nicole, and it's very intense. It was 30 days. It was, I think, twice a week we did calls, journaling every day, setting intentions. I want people to understand that you're not showing up, going into the Scooby-Doo van with a 24-pack of Strohs cruising down to Rosarita and, woo, let's go trip out. It's nothing like that.
Not that wouldn't be a fun trip.
Sounds pretty good, actually. Want to go?
As long as those surfboards are on the roof.
Let's do a podcast down there. But, there was 3 RNs, 2 cardiovascular surgeons. We had blood tests, blood work. It's really legit, and I think what it's doing is it's giving people a glimpse of, okay, here's the concept of it all, and really in the concept of reality. So my experience took all of the stuff that we've talked about and put it all together, all of it, and I really learned a lot. So I just, there was no way I'd miss this podcast, because it's just time. I want people to know that, yeah, the transition's tough, but transition to choose your best life and be happy and enjoy the ride. And see, like this guy, Austin Randolph, he just texted me, buddy check, right? Because I'm always buddy checking on him. He's got a tattoo of the rosary all across his entire back. And then the cross comes down to here. Austin, want to tell the story? He's like, 30 seconds. I go, I probably can figure it out. He goes, what do you think it is? I go, you should have never made it back. Yep. I'm like, okay. Don't need to talk about it anymore, right? And he's buddy check. About 8 weeks ago, this guy's on vacation on a wave. Bart, thanks. I'm still surfing. It's just like, yeah, so it's not about me. It's not about me at all. It's about us as humans and being good to each other. Sorry, dude.
You have absolutely nothing to apologize for. Absolutely nothing to apologize for.
Thank you.
I have been.
Woo!
No,
I am the rabbit hole.
No.
Maybe I am the hole. And everyone's just sorry.
I've had the opportunity to sit and talk with some veterans who have done the psychedelics.
Good.
And they espouse the same thing, that it was so beneficial for them. And I've had one explain to me that it would be a good way for the military to send you off into the civilian world
100%.
by basically just kind of filling the ruts in, so to speak.
My concept. So, what we're trying to do at Behind Thin Lines, we're making, we're raising some good money. We're trying to take advantage of Oregon, what's going on in Oregon. And my concept is, let's look at it. Even, you hear about the transition, in the military around the veterans, right? And then I imagine in the police think about the transition. And for the first responders, I think they think of the transition, right? But we've never all put it together. Right. We're all transitioning from for service to for something, most of the time for profit. And it's a hard transition. Having done the psychedelic experience, I actually think we need to look at it as an integration. And I think we need to look at it as something that takes potentially years, if not months. Right. And so as you're getting ready to leave the service, whether you're a fireman, police officer, veteran, whatever, active duty, whatever it's going to be, here, Paul, here's a laundry list of how we're going to help you integrate back into society, right? Because while, I flew over Iraq a lot and everything, I wasn't in direct combat like some of these guys on the ground, I dropped a couple bombs here and there, but it was nothing like what they went through. Nothing. Won't even ever begin to touch it, right? So these men and women have been in combat for 20 plus years. There's an average of 10 ODs being responded to by first responders in Portland, Oregon every day. These men and women are dealing with a lot of shit. So let's integrate them over time instead of looking at it as a tactical point in time and space of the transition. It's like, no. Don't really look at doing anything for about 8 to 9 months. Go get a job or something, or that's part of your transition out. Like the last 8 to 9 months, you're on payroll, but you're getting your shit straight, right? You're understanding who you are in this concept of this entire world that you're about to jump into. And so for me, when I left the Navy, I looked at it as coming out of like the, tuna fish. Remember that night shift? Feed the fish mayonnaise. Michael Keaton, remember that one? I
remember the movie. I don't remember the line.
I'm an idea guy, Chuck. But I looked at it like, oh my God, look at everything I can do. And so I've done it all very averagely. A lot of people, they focus and that's what they'll do. I couldn't get enough of life. I'm just like experiencing it all. Nonprofit, Behind Thin Lines, virtual reality software company. I'm working for an amazing biotechnology company right now. I blog. I've got like 50,000 followers. I don't even charge for it, right? I don't want to. Maybe one day when I retire, I'll be able to monetize it and get a little following or something. But, after dinner, I just like to go in there. It's my relaxation time. And I just, all right, what are you telling me? And I'm exercising the brain. And so this integration, it's the most incredible experience of your life, right? So take it that way. But at the same time, give yourself some grace of what you just went through, right? And take care of yourself, especially the greatest supercomputer that ever was invented, right? And that thing's probably been banged around a lot, right? So take care of yourself. And so my psychedelic experience blew the doors wide open to an understanding of life, to an understanding of the sacredness and the powerful and the beauty of life, to understanding the neutrality of life, right? This 3-dimensional hologram that we're living in, it's all neutral. So unfortunately, darkness needs light and light needs darkness. There is truly significantly ugly evil that exists. That's balanced by significantly powerful, beautiful light, right? So let's figure that out. Let's figure out how to balance the right and the left brain. And I'm starting to go there. I'll pull back.
I've often said that there is no way to measure what's truly good unless you can bounce it or mirror it against what's truly evil.
That's right.
And so you can't have
what a great
existence. You can't have an existence without the yin and the yang.
Boom. You should trademark that. I'm like, that's powerful. Yeah. Right. You can't. And so these people who are transitioning now, not going to say all of them, but the vast majority of them have touched and seen evil, right? They deserve to have their hero's journey to touch and see light.
And I just had this conversation today. The one thing that's unfortunate about these careers, veteran, first responder, is they put us in positions to see what humans can do at their absolute worst.
Yeah.
And that's our daily, that's what we go to work and do every day.
Yeah.
99% of the world doesn't understand how evil another human being can actually be.
Yeah.
You know,
I do.
When you know, you talk about war, I think is a necessity. But what man can do to man under the guise of war is horrendous.
Yeah.
What man can do to another man, and I put this more in the first responder world of what a human could do to a child. Your average neighbor going to work every day, working at some corporate 500, they've got zero concept. They may have watched a documentary on Netflix. They may, right. And they may
which
think,
isn't true.
They may think that they understand how bad the human mind can allow somebody to get to, but we get to see it our entire career.
Yeah, and that'll affect you. So get rid of that and go to here, which is doable. My buddy used to work, I think he still might work for the CIA. And we'd meet, about every, let's say once a quarter, hey Buzz, let's go out for, a coffee. Okay, I'll meet you, and he'd come in and he goes, so how's it going out here in the unreal world? That's what he would call it. I'm like, pretty good. He goes, this is Sims. This is not the real world and what we're dealing with on a daily basis, right? And so this is so focused, right? And we're not focusing on this, right? And so I was going to bring the book. I forgot it, but it's called...
Gee, thanks.
No, you'll love this one. It's probably the most powerful book I've ever read.
You gave up surfing to come on the podcast.
Yeah.
You couldn't remember to bring the book?
I'll bring it next time. It's only like a 25-minute drive. But it's called The Logos of Now, right? And it's called Conscious Language. This guy does the best job I've ever seen of understanding the power of these words, right? This is the human operating system. This brain and this mouth is creating this reality. And so it was 22 a day. Now it's 44 a day. Look, my son loves rap. In fact, my brother Darren Morton grew up in LA. We went to summer school together, and he did a paper. He was taking English to get ahead, and he did a paper on rap when it was first coming out. And he's like, "This is going to change the world." I'm like, "Darren, what are you talking about?" He goes, "No, seriously, Bart. This is 90s, 80s." I'm like, "All right, and but somewhere along the line, that language changed. It changed to fuck the police. And guess what's happening, right? And so we're awash in just negativity. We're bombarded by it. And that's what's creating the reality. This is where I wanted to go with this whole conversation. This is what I learned from the frickin' stock market, believe it or not, right? And so there's millions of first responders. There's millions of your brothers and sisters who are police officers who are choosing life and choosing to live. We don't talk about them. So it was 22, now it's 44. Why? Because we're focusing on the suicide. Let's focus on life. Let's focus and put our consciousness that co-creates with God on creating this. Because right now, it's creating this. And this disharmony, this dissonance in the music of the waves, it's creating a polarized world that we don't need to live in. We're all connected. And right now, we're connecting to a bunch of shit. Hey, people, 400 people, 2,000 people, who knows how many people, but I guarantee you one of them is going to take something from this, and that one becomes 2, that 2 becomes 4, and that, right? And we're going to change the world. This podcast is changing the world. So I had to come on it and just look at another fellow American. We never met each other before. We are having the deepest, most enjoyable, wonderful conversation, and I thank you for it.
I appreciate your time. The one pushback, though, I will give against you on the rap music.
Which is great.
Is I don't blame the music. And the reason why I say that,
I'm blaming the words.
and I'll go all the way down to the words. I remember in jail school, before I was a cop.
Don't even know what that is.
I was a jailer before I was a police officer.
Oh, wow.
This is the very late 80s, early 90s. Going to jail school, and I can still remember during the defensive tactics session, NWA playing the song and then talking about we can go toe to toe in the middle of a cell.
Uh-huh.
That was 30 plus years ago.
Wow.
Okay. You could use the analogy of Snoop Dogg and talking about 187
by the way
on a cop. Okay. You could talk about Ice-T, and I forget the name of the song now. Something when he went kind of into his heavy metal era. God, I'm drawing a blank on the song name. But you look at those men today. Snoop Dogg's hanging out with Martha Stewart, selling everything under the sun. Where I'm going with this is you've got to be able to look past the surface.
It's a great point.
It's an act.
Yeah.
They are out there to sell their music. Let them say what they want to say. You know, I mean, we were in the heavy metal era, and
heavy metal's just as bad.
And the hair bands, all they talked about were the women
Judas
and the
Priest,
the booze and the broads. You know, it's just music of the time is my only pushback.
I'm going to agree with your pushback. I think I'm trying to make an example that those words are what I'm trying to talk about. I'm not trying to call out rap or any of that. I'm just saying this book, right? And our veterans, our first responders, everybody's focusing on this part of it.
Yes.
And that creates more of it. Let's create this by changing the narrative. Mm-hmm. That's what I'm trying to say. Yeah. But I agree with you. Yeah.
Because I look back when I was a kid, and Motley Crue's Shout at the Devil came out in my junior year going into my freshman year of high school.
I never liked Motley Crue. I don't know why.
Oh God, they were my favorite at the time. At the time they were my favorite, and then you listen to them now and you're like, wow. There are some bands that have stood the test of time and they still sound good today. But where I'm going with this is,
yeah, there are.
Their album had a pentagram on it. They were singing, you know, and depending on whose version, Shout at the Devil was shouting against the devil, and you know the other side.
Van Halen Shout at the Devil?
No, Motley Crue Shout at the Devil.
I shouldn't even questioned you.
But where I'm going with this is, I never once listened to that album and thought I'm going to go be a devil worshiper. You know, it was just music. It was just music. They sang about you know girls in strip clubs. Okay, yeah, I've gone to strip clubs.
Yeah.
But I didn't go down a rabbit hole of like, I need to be in a strip club 7 days a week.
Correct.
So that's my only push against, because I do enjoy music, and I really think that it gets, no pun intended, it gets a bad rap sometimes.
Pretty good.
Because people need to blame something. True. They blame the video games. They blame the violence of the video games. In certain circumstances, could it have an impact? Of course.
Yeah.
But I think where I would like to see parents be parents.
Correct.
Raise your children the way I was raised, probably the way you were raised, where your mom and dad knew everything that was going on in your life. But on the flip side, like when you're talking about you rode your bike all the way to DC, there were times where you're like, Mom, I'm heading out. Yep. See, I'll be back by dinner.
Yes. Doesn't exist anymore, unfortunately.
You know?
Yeah.
And what that did is it forced you to grow up because you had to take care of things yourself. You hung out with a group of kids. You may have been the youngest or in the middle. Yeah. What you learned was your mouth is going to get you into as much trouble as it's going to get you out of. Mm-hmm. And so you go saying the wrong thing to the wrong person, and you come home with a black eye. You know?
And that happened.
We don't.
And my dad's like, learn to fight.
Kids don't have that today.
Yeah.
I think that they're way too sheltered.
I agree.
In what they're allowed to. Life's going to hurt them. Life is going to hurt them. Let them get those bumps and bruises along the way. So maybe when they're an adult, that little bump and bruise doesn't send them.
Here's something I say at the weddings. How many roller coasters exist in the world that don't go down? Can you think of one? They all end up going down, right? To get more speed, to do what?
Go back up.
To go back up, right? And so...
And maybe even get a loop in there.
That's right. And at the end of the ride, that was awesome. So when you get to that point, I'm going to burn out. I ain't fading away. I can tell you that right now. I'm going to be surfing when I'm 80.
That's a song.
Yeah, Neil Young. Dun, dun, no, 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 dun, no, 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 bum, bum, bum. Anyway, so when you get to the end of that ride, you're going to have your ups. You're going to have your downs. It's a hell of a ride. Whether we die right now or whether we die in 30 years, my mom's 95, right? It's a roller coaster ride. And my take, and I'm glad you did the pushback, is maybe you're not there. I'm no longer seeing is believing. I am believing is seeing, right? And so this thing is creating it all. So let's bring it over to this side and create positivity, create positive energy, create love, and create light. And especially for the men and women who have been fighting this all their life, the hero's journey, pretty fascinating when you start reading about the hero's journey, but the shadow self, right? And I had this conversation with a buddy of mine. Unfortunately, he had a blue on blue and dropped a bomb on a family in Afghanistan. And it roughed him up pretty good. But I was just telling him, I'm like, look, you've existed in this side of right? There's no reason you can't be over here in the light. You just have to choose it, consciously choose it. And it's a lot of work, but it's so worth it. It's so worth it, right? And so we get our men and women, our brothers and sisters, to just wallowing in here, and they can never break through the chasm. Entheogenics are a potential solution for that. Meditation, eating right, being active, right? Talking about if you're having struggles or not, finding that group of people that you resonated with when you were in service, right? All of those things will get you to here, and you just got to go for it, right? And that's the same way in business, right? Don't look at it as a transition, look at it as an integration, give yourself a break. I personally will never hire anyone who was in for service and this is their first job, because they'll be out of it in a year. They'll figure it out like, okay, I don't want to do this. I want the person, their second job, right? Of course I'd hire anybody, but you know what I'm saying? You have no clue what you're getting into, right? So the first clue is be good to yourself. Go back to love yourself, give yourself grace. You just were in an crazy operating environment, right? No matter what spectrum you were on. And you did great, and you did it honorably and ethically. And if you didn't, own up to it, right? Own up to it. And that was a mistake. That was the roller coaster, right? You made that decision for some reason. Who the heck knows why? But just own up to it. And then create your life new every single day. It ain't that hard, but it's the hardest thing you could ever do as a human, is to be happy. Why? It's really easy to be down on yourself. Oh, I saw you. But to constantly be working on being at that vibration of love and happiness, it's hard, but it's so worth it.
Do you think for some people that it's just easier to, as weird as this sounds, take the easy way out, say, all this is bad, all this bad stuff has happened to me, there's nothing good that's ever going to happen, and just kind of take it as a cop-out as opposed to fighting? Because there is going to need to be a little bit of a fight to get to that other side.
It's a fight. It's a struggle with yourself, right? I think that's human nature. So unfortunately, I think the answer is probably yes, right?
If you have to ask the question, you know the answer.
Well, that's a good one too, man. You got like 4 trademarks you need to work. You know, I can't even imagine the darkness that this person must feel if they're going to do something like this. Not even going to begin to even elucidate on that, right? But it's real. And so somehow we need to connect with them to be here. My take is the first thing is language. Listen to how they talk, right? They're giving you the clue. Their subconscious mind's telling them that they're not there, right? If you're having a conversation with a friend and they haven't said one thing positive, stop the conversation and say, dude, how are you doing? Right? And it'll probably take 2 or 3. I was having a conversation and I went into a meditation and it literally previewed the conversation. That was pretty good. And so I was like, are you happy? Yeah, I'm like, okay, ask again. You happy? Yeah. I'm like, are you happy? Crying. Like, there you go.
It's not what they're saying. It's how they're saying it and how they're delivering it.
Emotions. That's manifestation, right? If you're always in a state of negativity, you're manifesting negativity. So fake it if you have to, but man, get that vibration up to get to this side. Just make it a habit, right? It doesn't take long, but it is definitely a struggle. I struggled, but there's a lot of techniques. There's a lot of tools out there. Get out in nature, right? And then you're that much better in your job, right? Some of my best ideas, like how to crack into account, I'm a business developer, messaging, everything, to come out on the water. Right? There's no cell phone, there's no calls. I'm saying, what am I going to do here, right? Take time for yourself. And that's what we say at the retreat too. We're like, how many of you men have ever given yourself a vacation? You don't. You're a father, you're a policeman, you're a military person, you're paying bills, right? Take time off for yourself because you're no good to anybody. Anyway.
We're type A's. We take care of everything.
That's right. Not yourself.
No. We got to make sure everything else
is. Saying that because I just had like a revelation. Oh, wow. Maybe that's why I was fucked up as a lab rat for 10 years. Oh, my goodness. Where did we go on this conversation, man? We're all...
Hey, I
love it.
That's the one thing that's great about this podcast, and one of the reasons why I do not script the questions.
You couldn't have scripted this one.
Oh, I could have. I could.
You think so? No. Okay. I'm like, wow, I'd love to see it. Sorry, go.
Are they two separate nonprofits?
Yeah.
So you never mentioned the stand-up paddleboard nonprofit. What's that entity?
Yeah, so it's called the SUP Vets, and we're in the hat. And I owe you a hat and the book because I couldn't find where I put the hats. I know I got them in my house. But yeah, the SUP veterans, it's open to first responders, police, veterans in active duty.
How often do you have retreats?
We do 2 a year. We don't pay ourselves. I say 98% of the funds go to the retreats. 2%, we pay the accountant to do the taxes. We got a website, stuff like that. But the funds go to the retreats. There's 3 professional surf instructors. So one individual is Ian Kanga Carnes. He's actually one of the founders of the World Surf League, professional surfing. Unbelievable. Sean Pointer was the world champion in 2018. SUP surfer freestyler. And then Daniel Hughes. He is actually on the American surf team and won a bronze medal. So it's instruction beyond anything. And then we bring a Mexican because we're down in Mexico. Fernando or Felipe are Mexican waterman champions. They're incredible guys. So, when you bring 10 stand-up paddleboards out to the lineup, so hey, Felipe, can you help us out? Yeah, hold on, I'll take care of it. It's a week long. The vets, anybody who attends is responsible for the plane ticket. That's it. My wife does crystal bowls at night. We had Brain Tap, which is a really amazing app, braintap.com. They donated 10 headsets. So we give the vets the headsets during the week, give them a journal. And, it's interesting. We had this one guy, Sex, his call sign Sex, last name Sexton. And he was like, I really didn't want to go because I didn't want to be around a bunch of military guys swapping war stories. I didn't want to relive all that crap. We never did that once. He was like, I was so glad. We talked about life. We talked about business. We talked about surfing, right? Everyone was just enjoying themselves and not rehashing, remember that? Sometimes they come out, mostly aviators, just telling bullshit stories. But it's a really great event, and we've received nothing but positive energy from it. So we're going to hopefully, be able to keep doing it for as long as we can.
And you mentioned that, if I'm understanding correctly, you don't have to have prior experience.
None. We prefer that to a certain extent. What we'll try to do is, let's say 10, usually we did 12. That was too much. You want about 3 per instructor. So we try to get like 3 newbies, 3 kind of done a little bit, and then 3 guys who take it seriously, really want to progress, and then we break them up. But man, that Thursday when those guys who've never caught a wave before, they're paddling in, and everyone's like, go! And they catch the wave. And it brings you back to that camaraderie you had when you were in the force, right? It exists, right? When you're in for service and you're trying to help your fellow human being or be part of what, you think you're defending your constitutional republic, there's a camaraderie that exists. And so we recreate that out on the water, and everyone has a blast. It's really cool.
Do you have to have your own paddleboard, or do you?
No. Yeah. So the guys who do our retreat is Generation, GENRATION. They have their own line of SUP boards. And so they use a company called Sonova out of Australia, and they shipped like 13 boards over for us. So they're pre-positioned, and they're like $2,000 a piece. Probably shouldn't have said that. Someone's going to go steal them all, right? But they're incredible boards. So if you like it and you got your own board and you want to progress on your board, bring it. I bring mine every once in a while, depending on the type of boards that'll be there and people are coming. But if you don't worry about it. We've got the board, the leash, and the paddle for you ready to go. You
mentioned paddleboarding in the Maldives.
Yes.
So what's still on your bucket list for where you want to surf?
Well, my daughter's getting married in Bali in June. So I'm going to surf, but there might be a wedding. Just tell me being at the wedding and you're not going to see me, bride. I'm so excited about that. Probably getting down to Costa Rica. We've got some of the best waves in the world right here. And it was a pretty unique trip for the Maldives, and it was with the Generation guys, and I'd planned it. Our board member, Tim, went, and it was incredible, right? But it's a 30-hour flight.
Wow.
Yeah. I got an 8-hour layover in Turkey, which ended up being like 12. And I'm like, okay, I got a 20-minute drive, and the Maldives was beautiful and it was great and the whole experience was awesome. But unless you're a water person, I wouldn't go, right? If you don't like the water, you're going to be stuck on a little island and you might do a little slide into the water once. Everyone's like, oh my God, look, they got slides. Okay, you really going to do that? So if you don't like the water, you just drink and hang out. I mean, there's nothing to do. And then it's become really commercialized. Hard Rock cafes down there and the Marriotts. The Chinese are moving in. They're like connecting different islands with bridges, which is taking away the breaks. And then the commercialized like Hard Rocks, they own the break and they have people out on jet skis. So if you're not staying at the resort, you're not allowed to surf these world famous breaks. So it's kind of like, yeah. So we cruised all the way down to the southern Maldives, and that was unbelievable. There was like 7 different lineups, and I think there was 2 surf boats, and it was awesome. But it took us 2 days to get down there. So it was an incredible experience. Again, I was just experiencing life, man.
Anything else you want to cover?
No, I just really appreciate it, Paul. Hopefully we didn't get too deep. I just think, we're at this point in time and space where people got to realize who they are, that we're all connected, and we can really all get along if we want to. And for those men and women that are listening to this podcast, they can reach out and touch base with me anytime. This is your job now, right? Because if you get to that point of really loving yourself and loving life, then you will love your God and you will love your neighbor. And guess what? Business will flow. And it took me decades. I don't want to put an S on it. I'll say decade. It won't look that bad.
Decade-ish.
See, that's another. It took me a while to learn that. And so I wanted to make sure people saw someone who struggled. But I'm just going to keep going. It's a blast. But it took a long time. There was definitely periods here. Thank you.
I appreciate your time, sir. Thank you for sharing your story.
Thank you.
I appreciate you watching. But before you go, if you like the video, please hit that subscribe button. Also, any comments are appreciated. Thank you.